When everyone had gone to bed at my in-laws' house, I was taken to a small, dusty room. "What are we doing here, Lily?" I asked. My mother-in-law gave me an angry look. "Don't act like you don't know. This is where you're sleeping tonight." "But I'm supposed to sleep in the guest room with my husband." "There's no bed for someone like you." "Someone like me?" I replied. "You're the one being rude. Here, take these newspapers. Sleep on them," Lily said, handing me a bundle of old newspapers she found in the corner of the room. Why is she treating me like this? I thought, feeling upset and hurt. I had no choice but to say, "Okay." Once she left, I tried to leave the room, but the door wouldn't open. It was blocked. Feeling defeated, I spread a newspaper on the cold floor and sat down to cry. I couldn't handle it. I almost wanted to leave my husband rather than be treated this way. Just as I was crying, the door suddenly opened. To my surprise, it was someone I didn't expect. "My name's Emma. I'm 27, she said. I met my husband, Mark, at work and fell for his kind and honest nature. After 2 years of dating, we got engaged. Before visiting his family for the first time, he gave me a warning. My family lives in a big house in the country. My grandma is 80 and in charge. She can be strict, so I'm not sure how she'll like you. I'm sure it'll be fine. And your parents are nice, right?" I replied. I felt nervous the whole way there. His family's house was huge, with beautiful fields all around. It looked like a rich, well-kept place. "Hello, we're here," Mark said as we pulled into the driveway. His mom came out to greet us. I nervously greeted her and handed her a gift. "Oh, it's so nice to finally meet you," she said warmly, just like Mark had told me. I felt a little relieved as I was invited inside. There, I met his grandma and dad, who seemed kind. "Welcome. Come, sit down," his dad, Tom, said, inviting us to sit with his grandma. Lily brought us lemonade. "This is Emma. We're getting married this year," Mark introduced me. Tom smiled. "She seems wonderful. I'm glad for you, son." His grandma, though, stayed quiet and just watched me. As I nervously answered questions, I took a sip of the lemonade, but something tasted off. It was way too salty, almost like seawater. I gasped, almost choking. "Are you okay?" Tom asked, concerned. I quickly told myself it was probably just something they liked in the area. I didn't want to upset them. Suddenly, Lily spoke up. "If you're getting married, we'd like to meet your family too. When can we do that?" "Well, I only have my mom," I answered. Lily raised an eyebrow, and Tom looked at me kindly. "I'm sorry for your loss," Tom said, "but we'll make sure your mom is happy. You'll be well taken care of, Emma." Mark nodded, and I felt comforted by his words. When we were leaving, I put my shoes on, but something sharp poked into my foot. I yelped in pain. "Are you okay?" Mark asked, and Lily looked at my foot. "How did this get in your shoe? Are you hurt?" Lily said, concerned. "I'm fine, really," I said with a forced smile. On the way home, Mark tried to cheer me up. "I know you were nervous all day, but don't worry, everyone's happy to have you." "I'm not so sure. Your grandma didn't say anything to me," I replied. "That's a good sign. She's very honest. If she didn't like something, she would have said it right away." I guess so, but the salty lemonade and the glass in my shoe were strange. I thought to myself, but I didn't want to say anything bad about his family. After that, I met his family again, and Mark and I got married. My mom was so happy, and it made me feel better about my decision. We had a normal life for a while after that. Mark didn't mind me working, so we both contributed to the household. One day, I got a package from Lily. It had some vegetables inside. I called her to thank her. "Hello," she answered after a few rings. "Hi, Lily. The package arrived today." "Thank you," I said. "Oh, good. But it wasn't for you," she said, snickering. "I sent those for Mark. If you eat them, I'll be really mad," Lily said, keeping a smile on her face. She had been so friendly at the wedding, but now her tone was sarcastic, and I was confused. "I can't believe you actually got married. You knew you weren't wanted, right?" she continued. "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "I put salt in your drink and hurt you with a glass. You should have realized. You're so dumb." "I had a feeling those were tricks to annoy you," she said with a laugh. I was shocked by her words, but she kept going. "How can we accept a girl raised by a single mother into our family? Grandma didn't say anything to you, did she? That's because she didn't want you there." She didn't want to say anything in front of Tom and Mark, but she wasn't happy with you. Remember that. I felt tears coming to my eyes, and I sniffled into the phone. Lily seemed pleased with my reaction. If you tell Mark about this, I'll make sure you regret it. I don't think he'll believe you anyway, so you should divorce him as soon as you can. She hung up the phone. I stood there, choking up. When Mark came home, I couldn't tell him what had happened. He was excited about the package from his mom and didn't suspect anything. I couldn't tell him the truth. I told him that his parents lived far away, so I didn't have to deal with Lily face to face. But she kept calling me and making cruel comments whenever Mark wasn't around. She didn't like the fact that I was raised by a single mother, and she started making fun of my mom too. A woman raised by a single mom isn't good enough for my son. You probably grew up poor, didn't you? Your mom must be just as bad for raising someone like you. After dealing with her for so long, I started losing weight from the stress. Sweetheart, have you lost weight? Mark asked one day. I quickly replied, oh really? Maybe I've been on a diet lately. He seemed worried about me, but I brushed it off. As time went on, with summer approaching, Mark suggested, why don't we take a short trip to my parents' place? That's a great idea. I'm looking forward to seeing them again, I said, pretending to be excited. Mark was happy to be going home after a while, and I didn't want to ruin his mood, so I went along with it. But the truth was, Lily's harassment hadn't stopped. I was fighting a growing sense of anger inside me as the trip neared. The day came and Lily acted completely different, hiding her usual cruelty and greeting us cheerfully. I forced a smile and tried to be nice. When I greeted Mark's grandmother, Grace, she spoke to me for the first time. Welcome back, dear. Make yourself at home, she said kindly. Thank you, I replied. Tom, Mark's dad, was as friendly as always. He welcomed us with fresh watermelons and cold drinks. I stayed close to Mark, hoping it would keep me safe from Lily. It worked, though she still gave me nasty glares sometimes. But at least she didn't do anything too bad while we were there. I wanted to finish my trip in peace, but I couldn't ignore helping Lily clean up after dinner. I had no choice but to be alone with her in the kitchen. As soon as we were away from everyone, she threatened me quietly. What do you think you're doing, sticking to Mark all day? I told you to divorce him as soon as possible. I don't plan on leaving him, I replied, trying to sound firm. I want you to accept me. You want me to accept you? You're so bold for someone raised in a poor, single-parent home. If you ever show up here again, I'll make you regret it. Before I could respond, her face changed. I looked behind me and saw Grace standing quietly in the corner. Oh, are you going to bed now? Grace asked. Yes, I am, Grace said, giving us a long look before heading to her room. Once she was gone, Lily went back to bullying me. I had to keep my cool until I finished cleaning. When I was done, I went back to the living room. Mark was drunk after drinking with his dad. I'm going to bed, he said. You should get ready too. Then Lily spoke up. She said she wanted to look at the old photo albums, so I was thinking of showing her. I hadn't said anything like that, but Mark didn't doubt her. Oh, okay. Can I go first? He asked. Yes, I'll join you later. After Mark left, Tom got up, said goodnight, and went to his room. Once we were alone, Lily told me to follow her to the storage room at the back of the house. It was filled with old boxes and furniture, with a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. It was dark, small, and smelled musty. What are we doing here? I asked. Don't pretend you don't know. This is where you're sleeping tonight. Oh, but I'm supposed to join Mark in the guest room, I protested. She gave me a nasty look. There's no bed for someone like you. Someone like me? Yes, you're ugly. Here, take these newspapers. Sleep on them. She handed me a bundle of old newspapers with a smirk. Why? What did I do to deserve this? I thought, feeling both angry and sad. I could only reply in a shaky voice, I understand. I'll let you out in the morning. Have a good sleep until then, she said, leaving with a grin on her face. I tried to get out, but the door was blocked by something. I couldn't escape. I spread the newspapers on the cold, dusty floor and sat down to cry. After a couple of hours, I heard Lily snoring in the distance. I couldn't sleep. I just sat there, crying. Her bullying was more than I could take. I almost wished I'd left Mark just to escape the treatment. Just as I was crying, I heard the door rattle, and it opened. Grace. There she was, looking down at me with sharp eyes. What are you doing here? Well, I guess I know. She wiped my tears with her old, wrinkled hands. Then she pulled me up and led me into the hallway. She suddenly shouted, "Get up, everyone, and come to the living room." Mark was the first to react. He saw my tear-streaked face and looked at Grace in surprise. "What's going on, Grandma?" Tom came out of his room next. "Mom, what's happening? Why is Joy crying?" Finally, Lily came out, looking shocked. When everyone was in the living room, Grace sat at the head of the table and told me to sit next to her. Mark and Tom were both confused. "Here, tell us honestly, what happened to you today?" Grace asked sternly. "Don't worry about anything, just tell us." "Okay, Lily told me there was no bed for someone like me. She gave me newspapers to sleep on and locked me in the storage room." Mark was stunned. "She's been harassing me this whole time. She called me a child from a low-class, single-parent home. She even made fun of my mom, which hurt a lot." "That's outrageous. Lily, what do you have to say for yourself?" Tom shouted, glaring at her. Lily's lips trembled, but she said nothing. Grace turned to Tom. "It's all true. I found her in the street. I also heard Lily saying horrible things to her after dinner." Tom and Mark stared at Lily in shock. Grace glared at her, raising her voice. "What do you have to say about single mothers? I raised my children alone too. She's a good girl and you treated her terribly. You're the one who's hideous." Then Lily dropped the nice wife and mother act, screaming in fury. "Shut up, all of you. It's your fault. You've been flattering her. She's just a stupid girl from a single-parent home." "Hey!" Tom tried to intervene, but she continued. "Kick her out of the house right now. We're more important than her, right?" Grace shouted at her to be quiet, and the room fell silent. She turned to Tom. "You see, this is who you've been married to. I've warned you for years. She's been playing nice, but she's cruel at heart. I won't share a house with her anymore. If you won't get rid of her, you two will have to live together." Tom turned to Lily, his face red with anger. "You've always been selfish, but I never imagined you could be so cruel. Now that I know your true nature, I can't see you as my wife anymore." "What are you saying? I'll give you some money for now, but I want you out of here tomorrow." Lily was taken aback and turned to Mark for help. "Your dad is being horrible to me. Say something." "Enough," Mark said, his usually calm voice now full of anger. "What did you do to my wife? I'll never forgive you. I don't want to speak to you again. Don't ever show your face to me." Lily collapsed to her knees in shock, and everyone stared at her with disdain. No one comforted her. Instead, Tom and Mark both apologized to me repeatedly. I also apologized for not telling them sooner, and so the night passed into morning. Tom and Grace saw us off as we left. Before we left, Grace turned to me. "This is your home too. When you come back next time, Lily will be gone, so don't worry." I nodded and hugged her tightly before getting in the car. I later found out that Tom divorced Lily. He had had enough of her selfishness and inconsiderate behavior. They settled with a minimal division of assets. After being kicked out, Lily was turned away by her parents and ended up living alone in a small apartment. After being a stay-at-home wife for so long, she had to take up a part-time job. She must be struggling to adjust to her new life. She will probably spend her later years alone, but it's all her doing. As for me, I felt relief from the stress, and to my surprise, I'm pregnant. Since that incident, Mark has become even more affectionate toward me. Tom and Grace have been incredibly kind, and I've been able to enjoy my pregnancy without worry. I can't wait to go back and show Grace her great-grandchild once the baby is born. Right now, I'm really looking forward to that.
One day, my husband approached me and inquired, "Hey, how much money do we have in that safe?" I couldn't help but chuckle and replied, probably around $500,000 in total. Now, the following day, upon returning home, I discovered a signed divorce paper on the living room table. Both my husband and the vault were gone. My name is Helen, a 58-year-old working housewife who still puts in diligent effort at my job. You see, my hobby is saving money. Ever since my childhood, my mother opened a savings account for me, teaching me that depositing money in the bank would make the numbers in my passbook grow. I found it incredibly enjoyable to witness this growth. Starting with just $1, I would deposit a little bit at a time, relishing the experience of watching it accumulate. As my savings grew over the years, Earning a few cents in interest annually became a delightful surprise to my younger self. With a fondness for money and understanding how it works, I pursued a career as a financial planner, offering advice on asset management. One day, a college friend approached me concerned about an old childhood friend who was in serious trouble due to debt. They asked if I could offer some advice, and intrigued, I agreed to meet with him. This friend, named Mark, was a handsome man with a refreshing smile. He shared his story, confessing his love for gambling and the struggles he faced in making ends meet. Feeling sympathetic, I offered Mark some guidance. Given his precarious financial situation, I advised him to consolidate his debts and reduce his monthly payments to better manage his life. As my friend had asked for my help, I willingly lent a hand. Looking back now, I realized that perhaps I had developed a slight crush on Mark during our interactions. Little did I know that this would lead to a series of troublesome events. Against the advice of my friend, Mark and I decided to get married, believing that our union would help us face his debts together. Due to my stable income and financial expertise, most of Mark's income went towards paying off his debt. I made sure he severed ties with his parents to prevent the debt from escalating. Additionally, I provided Mark with a monthly allowance of $500. However, when Mark decided to cut ties with his parents, they responded with anger and resentment. His mother labeled him an ungrateful child, regretting ever giving birth to him. His father too expressed his discontent, desiring to confront me for what he considered thieving behavior. It was clear that they believed Mark belonged to them as a means to repay their debts. Exhausted from dealing with his parents' debt for so long, Mark finally stood up for himself, declaring he was not their ATM. He returned to me, feeling relieved to be free from their constant reminders of the financial burden. Soon after, we welcomed a son, Kevin, who bore a striking resemblance to Mark. Kevin became my pride and joy, but unfortunately, he inherited his father's lack of discipline and indecisiveness. Just as our son noticed Mark's carefree character, he also observed the never-ending cycle of borrowing money from predatory lenders, dealing with loan sharks, and tricking friends into lending him money for gambling. Our journey was not without its challenges, but I managed to keep Mark on track. Over the span of 23 years, we gradually reduced Mark's debt to around $10,000, nearing full repayment. One day, while on the verge of achieving our financial goal, Mark received a call from his parents. They informed him that his father had collapsed and was at the hospital. Concerned, Mark left work early to be by his parents' side. He messaged me, apologizing for breaking our promise and explaining the situation. I encouraged him to go and comfort his parents, assuring him it was all right. As Mark continued visiting his parents at the hospital, I provided him with a little extra money for the hospital fees they couldn't afford. It seemed my in-laws were struggling financially and relying on Mark for support. Although he withdrew a significant amount from our joint funds each visit, around $1,000 to $2,000 per month, I chose to let it slide, understanding their need for assistance. A year had passed since my father-in-law's collapse, and both my in-laws had aged significantly. They sought someone to lean on, and I suppose they found comfort in Mark's presence. Meanwhile, I continued my hobby of saving money. One day, I retrieved my bank book from the vault and smiled. Mark, who usually showed no interest in my financial endeavors, looked at me and asked, "Hey, how much money do we have in that bank account you always look at so happily?" I casually replied, "It's about $500,000 now." However, the next morning, I discovered divorce papers completed and left in the living room. Both Mark and the safe were gone. As I sat there having breakfast, I couldn't help but smile. I knew Mark had his eyes on the money in the vault, and he had planned to take it all. Imagining him attempting to carry the entire vault nearly made me burst out laughing. In our home, we had a black cat named Luna. We had installed a pet camera to watch Luna's adorable antics, which served as healing moments throughout my day. Luna provided a sense of comfort amid the unexpected turn of events. While watching the pet camera during my lunch breaks, I was always greeted by the adorable sight of my child. But one day, as I switched on the camera, something unexpected unfolded in our living room. My in-laws and my husband Mark engaged in an unbelievable conversation. "Oh, you live in such a nice house, Mark. Your good salary makes your mother so proud," they flattered him. Mark's father responded proudly, "Indeed, I make a decent salary myself. However, Helen takes it all, and I'm left with a mere allowance of $500 a month." "Are you kidding me? That's outrageous. You should be getting more," they exclaimed, sympathizing with Mark. "Why do you obey such a tyrant like Helen? You could live a much better life on your own," they continued. "Mark, you're our pride. You could have saved hundreds of thousands by now. But she's exploiting you? Poor thing." They manipulated him. Listening to their conversation, I wondered if they had completely forgotten that I had worked hard to pay off Mark's debts. I pondered what was going on in their heads. In the past, it was Mark burdened with debt from his parents, and I had to provide them with cash every month, making it challenging for us to get by. "Did you know she has a bank book with tons of savings? It's not fair that you only get $500. Mark complained, and in that moment, my in-laws' eyes lit up. They exchanged glances and eagerly leaned in, awaiting Mark's response. Last I heard, I think it was around $400,000 or $500,000, Mark answered. "Mark, isn't that money rightfully yours?" they asked, trying to persuade him. "It may not match the effort you've put in, but shouldn't you be receiving that money?" "Yeah, I guess you're right. I'm starting to think the same thing," Mark conceded. Despite his good looks, Mark was easily influenced and indecisive. In the past, I found this endearing and wholeheartedly devoted myself to him. However, it seemed he was being manipulated by his parents once again, and they were about to touch my precious savings. Witnessing this scene was incredibly painful. Tears streamed down my face as I sat at my desk at work, holding my phone. For the past 23 years, I had diligently set aside my own living expenses from Mark's income, primarily using it to pay off our debt. On top of that, I provided him with a $500 allowance from my own pocket. Despite explaining this to Mark, it appeared he had completely forgotten what the past 23 years had been for. I felt a deep sadness and pitifulness, as if I were drowning in my own tears in that moment. I made the decision to record the conversation and promptly sent the data to my son. Claiming sickness, I left work early and headed to my regular bar, where I drowned my sorrows in alcohol. Pouring out my heart to the bartender, he gently comforted me, saying, "Why do you grieve for someone like that? You've done nothing wrong. There's no need to live for them. Live for yourself." In that moment, my love for my husband and my intoxication faded away. "Thank you, sir. Next time, we'll share a pleasant dream," I said to the bartender before leaving. Returning home, I entered my study and began devising a plan to retrieve the bank book from the safe. I couldn't fathom how to accomplish it, but I was determined to show them hell. They should never underestimate me. Concentrating harder than ever, I knew that gathering evidence was the first step. From that day on, I diligently checked the pet camera every day, and slowly, the ugly truths began to surface. Instead of the woman my husband was having an affair with, my in-laws started appearing on the camera in our house. They were discussing their plan to take the bank book from me. "Is everything arranged to take that bank book from Helen?" they asked, grinning unpleasantly. "You're smart. You must have thought of something, right?" "Yeah, I have a plan. I'm thinking of taking the entire vault." "It'll be easy," Mark responded confidently. "But the safe is quite heavy." "Are you sure you can handle it?" his father questioned. "I'll be fine. I'll load it onto a cart." "Dad, helping out," Mark replied, and his father agreed, saying, "All right, I'll assist you anytime." The safe weighed around 120 pounds, confirming my suspicion that Mark, despite his good looks, was not very smart. At that moment, I solemnly pledged to drag these people down to the depths of hell. They had not only betrayed me, but also ruined the precious moments I spent watching Luna, our cat. Witnessing my husband's infidelity through the camera was a painful blow. I had hoped to find solace in Luna's presence, but even she seemed scared and wouldn't show up. These people had shattered my peace, but I vowed to punish them severely. One day, while I was working, I activated the pet camera once again. This time, it wasn't the woman my husband was having an affair with. Instead, it was my in-laws at our house, discussing their plan to take the bank book from me. With determination in my heart, I continued to gather evidence, and soon the day would come when I would execute my plan and show them the consequences of underestimating me. Facing the reality of my impending divorce, I found myself strangely accepting of the situation. Just how desperate were these people to go after money? I sat at my office desk, sipping coffee, and recorded the scene on my phone screen. Surprisingly, I wasn't upset or sad anymore. If they had such intentions, so did I. I was determined to show them the consequences of their actions. Then, the day finally arrived. "Hey, how much money is in that passbook on the vault? You always seem so happy when you're looking at it," Mark asked. "Right now, there's about $500,000 in there," I replied casually. The next day when I arrived home, I discovered a signed divorce paper in the living room. Both my husband and the vault were gone. A smirk formed on my face as I sat down to have breakfast. I acted quickly, immediately filing the divorce papers and contacting my son Kevin. "Your father finally stole the vault. Can't believe he managed to carry it. It's so heavy," I told him. Kevin responded, "Mom, I think it's about time you end things with Dad. By the way, did he take everything in the vault too?" "No, actually, I moved all the money to online banking. The passbook is essentially worthless now. The most valuable thing might have been the safe itself since it was so heavy. Oh, by the way, I've already filed the divorce papers. Now I'm thinking about filing a police report. What do you think?" I explained to Kevin, who agreed and suggested that I should file a police report and hire a lawyer. "Right, a lawyer. I already have a private investigator on it, but I hadn't thought about a lawyer." "Thanks," I replied to Kevin. He seemed exasperated. Following Kevin's suggestion, I reached out to a lawyer through my private investigative contact. I handed over the recording from my pet camera to both the police and the lawyer, and then I waited. After a while, I received a call from my ex-husband, sounding quite frantic. "What the hell? The passbook is empty. What happened to the $500,000? You tricked me. That was my money. Where is it? Tell me now, or I'm going back to the house and abandoning your cat Luna," he threatened. "You just committed theft, and now you're threatening me. From now on, communicate through my lawyer," I calmly responded and blocked his number. I reported the incident to the police and sent the recording to my lawyer. It was a relief to finally take action. This was exactly what I had wanted to do. A short while later, I received a call from the police. "We have caught the thief. However, the vault was damaged. It appears he forced it open, and the things inside were burned," they informed me. My ex-husband and his parents learned that the passbook balance was zero, and they set the contents of the vault on fire. Although it was his first offense, my ex-husband spent a few days in custody. Discoveries continued as my ex-husband broke into the house he used to live in after his release. However, I had already filed for a divorce and obtained a restraining order. When he started causing a scene, I called the police, and within 10 minutes, they took him away again. I contacted my lawyer, explained what happened, and had him start the process of getting a restraining order. Furthermore, I asked the lawyer to sue for emotional distress due to his infidelity. The lawyer mentioned that we might not get much money from his broke family, but that didn't really matter to me. What I wanted was alimony. It seems my ex-husband broke into our house because he was discarded by his mistress and wanted to get back with me. His mistress promptly transferred $10,000 as alimony and seemed to have disappeared. It appears they split after the vault incident, realizing that when the money runs out, so does the love. My underpaid ex-husband, who still has $10,000 in debt, and his gambling-addicted parents seem to be struggling with their daily lives. He is living in an old single-room apartment without a bath, constantly quarreling with his parents. This information came from my lawyer. My ex-husband pleaded with me, saying, "I can't afford to pay the alimony. Please reduce the amount." But I refused, telling him to stay away from me. "If you're really sorry, show it with money," I said. If he had stayed with me, he had planned to end the remaining $10,000 of debt by the time he retired. But he fell for the sweet talk of his gambling-addicted parents-in-law. In the end, how foolish they all were. The $500,000 in savings was the accumulation of my hard work since a young age. I find joy in saving small change and updating the bank book. Now I will start a new bank book. I am living a relaxed life with my black cat Luna. My son visits occasionally and tells me about his girlfriend. This time, I am going to spend time for myself. I need to buy a new safe, one that's so big that a person can't carry it. Right, Luna? I am the happiest I've ever been.
Your presence here ruins the atmosphere of the venue. Could you please leave? He sneered. Though he was technically my brother-in-law's father, his words cut deep. I had traveled a long way to celebrate my sister's wedding, only to find out I was an uninvited guest to the groom's family. What's the matter? Hurry up and leave. Just having someone like you here ruins the wedding, he spat. Understanding I wasn't welcome, I nodded. Understood. I'll take my leave. I stepped outside and called my husband. What's going on? Why are you here? He asked, concern in his voice. I was told to leave, so I did, I answered honestly. There was nothing else to say. What does this mean? He muttered darkly, turning his gaze toward the groom's family. They stared back, unrepentant. My name is Lisa, and I'm 32 years old. I live with my husband, who is 11 years older than me. The only family I have left are him and my younger sister, Summer, who is 10 years younger. Our father left when I was 10, leaving us in a single-parent household. Summer had just been born, and our mother worked tirelessly to raise us. She juggled jobs from morning till night, and I stepped in to take care of my sister. Despite the hardship, I never complained. We managed until I graduated high school, but years of overwork caught up with my mother, and she passed away. With no extended family to rely on, Summer and I were left to fend for ourselves. What's going to happen to us now, sis? Summer asked, her young face full of fear. Don't worry, I'll manage somehow, I reassured her, though I had no plan. I found a job as a clerk at a small company. The pay wasn't great, but they were willing to hire a high school graduate. It was a small workplace, so I quickly found myself handling a variety of tasks. At first, it was simple clerical work, but my responsibilities grew over time. The boss, however, was kind and supportive. Lisa, would you like to earn a qualification? He asked one day. A qualification? Yes, it's a bit specialized, but we need someone qualified, and you're young, it shouldn't be too hard for you to study, he explained. Would this be outside of working hours? Don't worry, we'll cover the exam fees and textbook costs, please, I'm asking as a favor. The boss's earnest demeanor made it hard to refuse. Besides, earning a qualification could open more doors for me in the future. I thought of Summer, her needs would only grow as she advanced through middle and high school. Understood, I agreed. Don't push yourself too hard, sis, Summer would sometimes say, her voice filled with concern. Don't worry about me, when you graduate high school, you can do whatever you want, I told her. As she entered high school, Summer began considering working right after graduation, but I didn't want her to struggle the way I had, so I convinced her to aim for college. There was one problem, my salary made saving for tuition difficult. I began thinking about changing jobs. When I confided in my boss, I expected disappointment, but he was surprisingly understanding. I completely understand, he said. Actually, I know someone starting a new company. They're looking for someone to handle clerical work. A new company? Yes, and don't worry, it's run by someone very capable. Their business is already doing well, and they're looking for talented employees. The boss assured me the new company's work would be similar to what I was already doing. It sounded ideal, though leaving felt bittersweet. I've been thinking of closing this company soon anyway, my boss admitted. Most of us here are nearing retirement, and it's getting harder to keep up, so don't worry about leaving, you've done more than enough. After 5 years with the company, hearing his kind words brought tears to my eyes. Don't cry, he said gently. If I make a young girl cry, my wife will scold me. It's better when you smile. With his blessing, I joined the new company. Nice to meet you, I'm Mike, my new boss introduced himself. He was 38, with an air of professionalism that was hard to miss. Nice to meet you, I'm Lisa, I replied. We really needed someone with your qualifications. You've been a great help already, Mike said warmly. If you could handle things at your previous company, I'm confident you'll excel here. Thank you very much, I said, feeling both nervous and excited for what lay ahead. I was nervous, but I think I handled it well. Before I knew it, Mike's company had become my new workplace. It was a startup, aggressively expanding, and Mike was at the center of it all. Though it was a new company, it seemed well-backed, with many big projects already on the table. I'm really grateful to have you here, Lisa, Mike said one day. Your office skills are specialized, and it helps that you have such a strong background. I'm glad I invested in your training. His words made me happy, and as time went on, I could see the company growing. Mike appreciated my work, and I no longer worried about my sister's tuition or our daily expenses. You seem so lively these days, my sister commented one morning. Really? Before, you always seemed overwhelmed by work, but now you seem to enjoy it. Maybe it's because of someone, I teased. Mike? She asked, joking. Don't be silly, I laughed. Go get ready for school. 4 years later, I was 27, and my sister was about to graduate high school. She was doing well in school and aiming for her preferred university. Barring any health issues, she was expected to pass. Meanwhile, Mike's company was flourishing, taking on larger projects, and Mike was a brilliant leader, always bringing in new work and building partnerships. The number of employees quickly increased, and before I knew it, I was training new hires. How about a trip sometime? Mike suggested. A trip? But my schedule. I anticipated that. I'll make sure to wrap things up early. Leave it to me, thank you, but that feels like a luxury. Mike insisted. Let's relax a bit. You've earned it. As part of the founding team, I spent a lot of time with Mike. Naturally, our relationship grew romantic. Despite the 11-year age difference, it didn't matter to me, but there was one thing on my mind. Could we wait to get married? One late night, just the two of us in the office, I decided to share my feelings. Mike, it's not that I don't want to marry you. You're a wonderful man, and I do want to marry you, but I have my sister. She's much younger than me, and until she's independent, I can't leave her. Could we wait until she graduates? I feared it was a selfish request. Mike, already in his mid-30s, was likely thinking seriously about marriage. I wasn't sure if it was too much to ask. Of course, I'll wait until she graduates, Mike said, without hesitation, but in return, let's have dinner with your sister. After all, she'll be family. I was touched by his understanding. His assertiveness was part of what made him such a successful entrepreneur. So, the three of us began spending more time together. As Mike's company stabilized and my sister neared the end of her high school years, we all decided to go on a trip together. It was a wonderful experience, one we wished could last forever. But eventually, the trip ended. My sister went off to college, and Mike and I returned to work. Since the university was nearby, my sister still lived with me, but I knew we'd see less of each other. Around that time, she told me she wanted to get a part-time job. Sure, everyone starts with no experience, I said, though I was still a little worried. I'll be fine, she reassured me. I've been learning about business management from Mike. I'm ready. Her optimism surprised me. She was so much more mature than I had expected. She had always been like that, and her positivity had helped me through tough times. Then, one day, she surprised me even more. Sis, guess what? She said, her eyes sparkling. What is it? I'm getting married after college. I was stunned. Married? Sorry, what? She continued nonchalantly. I'm serious about marrying after graduation. Who's the guy? You don't know him. Or maybe you do. Don't mess with me, I said, half in disbelief. In the summer of her junior year, she announced her plans to get married. I was completely shocked, though she often said surprising things. I hadn't expected her to go this far. The word marriage was sensitive for me, especially considering my thoughts about Mike and me. Remember the business seminar? She asked. I clicked with a guy there. He's planning to start his own company, and he's a good guy, so I thought. Why not marry him? Marriage isn't something to take lightly, I said, my voice rising. It's a big commitment, a lifetime decision. I almost expressed my bitterness about our parents, but held it back. My sister gave me a direct look. Don't you want to respond to Mike's feelings? She asked. But I promised to look after you until I graduate. You think I can't manage without you? I've got my life planned, and I've met a good guy. You need to think about your own happiness. Tears welled up in her eyes. She was no longer the little girl I had cared for. Unless you get married first, it's awkward for me, she said. I guess so, I replied softly. Mike and I ended up getting married, and everyone at the company celebrated. Even my first boss came to offer his congratulations. But I still had one more task, meeting my sister's fiancé's family. Brian, her fiancé, seemed like a great guy. He was the eldest son of a small business owner. The business is going to my brother, though, Brian explained. Really? I asked, curious. I always wanted to start my own business, he said, and I liked the idea of working with our family business, so we decided to start our own company together. That's how we met, he added, smiling. Pretty cool, right? We've already incorporated, even as students. Student entrepreneurship isn't that uncommon these days. I was an employee myself, so I couldn't fully follow their discussions, but Brian's family seemed like good people, and I felt he was compatible with my sister. I didn't worry about their future. It was Mike who had introduced Summer to Brian, and he had played a key role in connecting them. I was grateful to him. Our first meeting ended on a warm note, but I still had to meet the rest of Brian's family. It was a natural step, now that we were becoming relatives, but the business owners made me nervous. Strangely, they asked me to come alone. Lisa, yes? I believe you're here to discuss your sister's marriage to Brian. That's correct, I replied, trying to remain composed. That's not why we called you. My father-in-law's voice was sharp. We're here to ask you not to get involved. I was taken aback. What do you mean? You never went to college, you lost your parents, and while Summer seems capable, you certainly don't. Don't expect any help from us. I have no intention of relying on you. I shot back. I've worked hard all my life, supported myself, and planned for my future with Mike. Whether I retire later or not is none of your concern. Words are cheap, my father-in-law sneered. There are many unreliable people out there. We'll invite you to the wedding out of courtesy, but afterward, stay away. The people attending will be far above your station. It would be embarrassing for you to show up. Their laughter echoed with scorn, and I couldn't bear it any longer. When my sister gets married, she'll have a proper family with Brian. Let's hope she doesn't end up like you, they added cruelly. Tears welled in my eyes, but I held my head high as I excused myself. I won't miss my sister's special day, I said firmly, though my voice trembled. As soon as I was outside, I half ran home, tears streaming uncontrollably. No matter how much I washed my face, the pain lingered. Looking at my red, swollen eyes in the mirror, I whispered to myself, I'll never let them see me like this again. The insults didn't just hurt me, they felt like an attack on everyone who had supported me throughout my life. But no matter what, I resolved to attend my sister's wedding. Watching her get married felt like a final act of letting go, a passing of the torch. Time flew by, and soon, her college graduation and wedding day arrived. You'd better come to my wedding, sis, my sister teased. I've planned an amazing day. I wouldn't miss it for the world, I replied with a smile, hiding my unease about seeing Brian's family again. The venue was extravagant, and the guests exuded wealth and prestige, dressed in formal wear. I felt overwhelmed but kept my composure as I showed my invitation to the usher. He guided me to a private room. As soon as the door opened, mocking voices greeted me. So, you actually came. You really don't understand social cues, do you? Standing before me were Brian's father, mother, and younger brother Dustin, all dressed in high-end suits and designer attire. Why are you here? Dustin sneered. Do you not realize how far beneath us you are? Having someone like you here lowers the venue's prestige. You weren't really meant to show up, his father added. Even though we invited you, we expected you to know better. Get the guards to remove her, Dustin said dismissively. The flood of insults continued, cutting deep. I endured them silently until they crossed the line. What if Summer ends up like you? Dustin spat. She won't, I snapped, my voice shaking. Summer is hardworking and smart. Besides, she and Brian are starting their own business together. Ridiculous. Brian will take over our company, not start some side project, his father scoffed. That's not what they said, I countered. They've already incorporated their own company. Their faces twisted in disbelief. Before they could hurl more accusations, the door opened. "Sorry I'm late." Mike's voice filled the room. The family's demeanor shifted instantly. "Mike, it's been too long." They greeted him warmly, falling over themselves to show respect. Mike ignored their pleasantries. "Have you seen my wife?" "Your wife?" they echoed, shocked. "Oh, there she is," Mike said, spotting me in the corner. "Why are you standing there?" "They told me to leave," I said softly. Mike's expression darkened. "Why would you tell my wife to leave? She's also the bride's sister." The room fell silent, their faces pale. "We didn't know," the father stammered. "Explain what happened," Mike demanded. I recounted everything truthfully. "So, you insulted my wife and tried to humiliate her?" Mike's voice was icy. "Insulting her is the same as insulting me. Is that how you treat family?" "We didn't mean to insult her," they stuttered, visibly sweating. "Then what did you mean?" Mike's piercing gaze made them shrink. After a long pause, he continued, "I do business with your company, but we're not family. Brian is my friend, but that doesn't mean I'll tolerate disrespect toward my wife. Effective immediately, I'll be ending our business relationship." "Wait, that will ruin us," Brian's father cried. "Please reconsider." "I won't. Don't worry, though, I'll work with Brian and Summer's new company instead. They've earned my trust." The family looked stunned, realizing they had lost both their son's loyalty and a critical business partner. Mike turned to me. "Let's go," he said, leading me out of the room. The wedding proceeded without further drama. Brian and Summer began their new life together, moving into a new home as they focused on growing their business. Meanwhile, the in-laws faced the consequences of their actions, their company struggling without Mike's support. As for us, life brought a new chapter. I gently patted my belly one evening, excitement and nervousness filling me. When Mike returned home, I greeted him with his favorite stew and a big smile. "I have news," I said, placing his hand on my stomach. His eyes lit up. "Really? That's amazing." He hugged me gently. With a baby on the way, our family was growing, and though our responsibilities would increase, I knew we could handle it. Together, we would build a happy home filled with love and hope for the future. Hi, I'm Julia, and I've just hit the milestone of 42. Ever since I can remember, working hard and achieving independence have been my dreams. I've always wanted to carve out my own path, and thankfully, I've been able to do just that. From the moment I entered the professional world, being smart with money and seeking opportunities to grow financially were my top priorities. This drive didn't come from nowhere. It's something deeply rooted in my upbringing. My mom always emphasized the importance of financial independence, especially as I ventured into my career in corporate strategy analysis. Meeting Albert, my husband, felt like a breath of fresh air. He's the kindest soul you could ever meet, but I can't say the same about my in-laws. Despite their coldness, with little love from my sister-in-law, brother-in-law, and mother-in-law, Albert and I got married. It's been 12 years now, and like any couple, we've had our ups and downs. Lately, though, I've sensed a chill between us, and I can't help but wonder if it's connected to some big news we received a few months ago. I remember that day so clearly. I had just come home from work, buzzing with excitement over some fantastic news. As I walked into the kitchen, Albert greeted me. "Hey, babe." "Hey, honey," I replied, my voice full of joy. "Guess what happened today?" Albert's curiosity was piqued, and he urged me to share. I told him I'd gotten a promotion at work. Unable to contain my excitement, I even broke into our signature happy dance, a little tradition we've had for 12 years, celebrating all our big moments, graduations, our engagement, wedding day, and even the news of our pregnancy. But as my dance came to an end, I noticed Albert wasn't joining in. Confused and a little disheartened, I asked him why he wasn't participating. With a sigh, a mix of disappointment and frustration in his voice, he said, "I'm happy for you, babe." His response was so unlike his usual enthusiastic self, leaving me to wonder what was really going on between us. Then, Albert shared his own news. "I got laid off," he said, his voice low, head dropped in what seemed like a mix of sadness and shame. The room went quiet, the kind of silence that felt almost unbearable. I stood there, at a loss for words, suddenly feeling guilty for my earlier excitement. My good news must have felt like salt in the wound. "I'm so sorry," Albert, I said, trying to comfort him. This is just heartbreaking. He shrugged it off. Yeah, well, that's life, isn't it? The heaviness of the moment hung in the air. How about we go out tonight? A meal might cheer you up, I suggested, trying to lift the mood, but Albert wasn't interested. I appreciate it, Julia, but I'm not really in the mood. I think I need some time alone, he said, then added, congratulations, by the way, making an effort to acknowledge my promotion. The following days were less tense, but a sense of discomfort lingered. It was clear resentment was growing between us. Given the situation, I understood why Albert might feel envious. He had always leaned toward traditional roles, wanting to be the sole breadwinner while expecting a spouse who focused on home care. But that kind of lifestyle hadn't been feasible for us. We prioritized our children's private education, and I've always believed in earning my keep and achieving financial independence, values my mother instilled in me from a young age. With my recent promotion, I was getting closer to securing a comfortable future for us. Meanwhile, Albert's job loss remained a sensitive issue. He spent his days in a slump, neglecting house chores and diving into documentaries and video games. I chose to be patient instead of confrontational. A month passed, but his demeanor didn't change. Even the visits from my in-laws, whom I've never gotten along with, were more tolerated than anything. I pushed aside my discomfort to support Albert and care for his needs. It breaks my heart to see you this way, one of them said during a visit that had all of them, my sister-in-law, brother-in-law, and mother-in-law, under our roof at the same time. Their presence tripled the tension, creating an atmosphere in our home that was hard to bear. I braced myself for the critical and judgmental comments, hoping that, despite everything, my in-laws' visit might provide Albert with some comfort during this tough time. But nothing could have prepared me for Roy's shocking remark. I'm honestly surprised it was you who got laid off, he said, his tone dripping with condescension. I would have thought Julia would be the one in that position first. Considering the way things usually go, you know, women are the ones who stay home with the kids more often. His outdated views left me speechless. Before I could respond, my mother-in-law barged into the room, her arms loaded with food and drinks for Albert, as if he were seriously ill rather than simply unemployed. Oh, my poor baby, she exclaimed, her voice on the brink of tears. This is just devastating. Albert tried to lighten the mood. It's tough, but I'm not at death's door. Julia's been a huge support, he said, offering a weak smile, but his words did little to break the thick tension in the room. Someone, likely echoing Albert's traditional views, scoffed, a wife supporting her husband? What has the world come to? As if the situation weren't challenging enough, my sister-in-law suggested, maybe it's time to get dinner ready, we'll be here a while. Exhausted from my long workday, I felt my frustration building. After my promotion, I'd been pushing myself harder than ever, determined not to let up and show any weakness. The last thing I needed was more family drama, especially with Albert's job loss. I was already juggling the responsibilities of work and home life, and after a grueling day, I hoped for a bit of relief. Albert, do you think you could handle dinner tonight? I asked gently, hoping he could step up for once. On some days, he'd agree, but the results were often underwhelming, even though he used to be a decent cook before the layoff. With the kids staying with friends, it was just the two of us, cooking for a crowd, especially with my in-laws now in the house, was the last thing on my mind. I'm really tired from work lately, I said, offering an alternative. How about we order in? There's this fantastic place that does amazing noodles. My sister-in-law and mother-in-law gasped dramatically, clearly taken aback. You're going to order takeout? We're your guests, my sister-in-law exclaimed, her voice rising in offense. We hardly ever get invited here, and this is the reception we get? My mother-in-law joined in. Noodles? Really? That's just not acceptable. This younger generation's ideas are spreading everywhere, even to us. Julia, we understand you're busy, but Albert's going through a tough time. As his wife, shouldn't you at least make us dinner? I felt cornered, exhausted, and frustrated, but to avoid further conflict, I gave in. I understand your family, not strangers, I said, my voice tight, but seeing how important this is to you, I'll make dinner, just be patient. It might take a while, because I'm really tired. Just as I was about to start preparing the meal, Albert finally spoke up, his words taking me by surprise. She's been forcing me to cook dinner, he said quietly. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law looked as if they could hardly breathe from the shock. Roy's disapproval was evident on his face as he glared at me. She did what? How could you, Julia? That's so selfish, my brother-in-law snapped, accusing me of being the one at fault. Their judgment stung, making me question myself. Was I really the villain in their eyes for sharing household responsibilities with my husband, especially on days when I needed help? When I was utterly spent from work, Albert's voice cut through the exhaustion. I'm sorry, Julia. I didn't mean to make you out to be the bad guy, he said, though his words only seemed to add fuel to the fire. But it feels unfair to burden me with chores, given our roles, he added, echoing the antiquated beliefs that seemed to govern his expectations of marriage. Caught in a whirlwind of criticism for simply wanting a fair share of household responsibilities, especially during such exhausting times, I found myself apologizing for seeking balance in our partnership. Hearing the tremble in Albert's voice as he finished speaking softened my heart. It was clear he was struggling, caught in a grip of loss and confusion. Depression is a heavy weight that can immobilize even the strongest, leaving them adrift in a sea of hopelessness. Perhaps Albert was overwhelmed to the point where even the smallest tasks felt insurmountable. With that realization, I chose empathy over frustration. I'm so sorry, Albert. From now on, let me handle dinner and everything else. You don't need to worry about it, I assured him, swallowing my own frustrations. In the kitchen, I prepared the meal, serving it once everything was ready. The dinner table buzzed with conversation among Albert, Abigail, Roy, and Brittany, but I was left in silence, my presence either unnoticed or ignored. The earlier argument had felt so one-sided, and it stung to realize that Albert, too, seemed to see me through the lens painted by my in-laws' accusations. Despite the hurt, I set aside my pride. From that day forward, I took on the cooking and cleaning, adding to my already mounting stress and fatigue. As weeks turned into months, I continued to shoulder the burden of being the sole breadwinner. Thankfully, the recent promotion had provided a financial boost, but the reality was that our lifestyle, particularly our daughter's private schooling, couldn't be sustained on a single income. Albert's attitude towards me grew increasingly sour, his interactions brief, dismissive, like a child upset over a toy he could no longer have. It was time for a difficult conversation. Albert, we need to talk about our financial situation. It's unsustainable to keep going like this on my salary alone. We have to think about the girls and their schooling, I ventured, my voice steady despite the weight on my shoulders. He shot back defensively, but you have a job now, you got that promotion, remember? You're making more money now. Yes, Albert, I'm aware, but we need to face reality. Our daughter's education is costly, and we can't ignore that, I replied, trying to keep the frustration from seeping into my tone. His defensive stance softened as he saw the tears welling in my eyes, the strain of everything we were juggling finally breaking through. I know, he said quietly. I'm sorry, Julia, it's just that this situation has me stressed. His tone finally acknowledged the weight of our predicament. For the first time in a while, the walls between us seemed to lower. We both understood that we had to navigate this together. The journey ahead would require both of us to face our struggles, emotionally and practically, for the sake of our family. Albert finally acknowledged the need for action. You're right, I'll start looking for work tomorrow, he said, his voice filled with newfound resolve. But I had a different solution in mind, one that wouldn't require him to search far and wide for employment. Thanks to my consistent networking and positive rapport with my new boss, I was in a position to offer him an opportunity that might just solve our financial woes without him needing to take on the weight of another job search. I found myself in a unique position to help Albert, despite our mutual preference for working at separate companies to maintain our individuality and keep our professional lives distinct from our personal relationship. However, desperate times called for unconventional measures. Actually, you might not need to look elsewhere, I proposed cautiously. I think I can secure a job for you at my workplace. Yes, I had taken the initiative to leverage my connections and goodwill to arrange a job opportunity for Albert at my company. Our decision to work together wasn't made lightly, considering how much we valued our independence, but, given our circumstances, it seemed like the most practical solution. Little did we know, this decision would set off a chain of events that would lead us into uncharted territory. Months into Albert's new role, he was thriving, showing remarkable progress at the company. Then, one evening, he came home with news that left me stunned. I've invited my mom, Abigail, and Roy over for dinner. I have some important news, he said, visibly excited. Following his request, I prepared dinner and welcomed our guests, eagerly anticipating the big reveal. During the meal, Albert announced his promotion, which was met with cheers and excitement from everyone. Despite my initial surprise at how quickly he had advanced, I couldn't help but feel joy for him and relief that he was emerging from his earlier despondency. But then, the celebration took an unexpected turn. Albert handed me a hotel key card. Thinking it was a thoughtful gesture for a celebratory night away, I expressed my gratitude, imagining how much I needed a break. But then Albert's next words hit me like a slap. "No, it's not a hotel room for us, it's a hotel room for you." I was left reeling. The situation was as bewildering as it was shocking, a twist I had never anticipated. It became clear that the dynamics of our relationship and professional lives were about to change in ways I hadn't expected. My confusion grew as I noticed that my in-laws seemed oddly satisfied with the situation, almost as if they had been plotting this moment. "What's happening here?" I managed to whisper, my voice barely audible. Abigail took the lead, explaining that Albert had confided in them about his new job and how well he was doing. "We suggested to him," she said, "that considering his recent success and bonuses, it might be time for him to reevaluate his life and choices, especially after our last visit. We didn't appreciate your attitude then." I was stunned. They were not just proposing, but insisting that Albert and I take a break from each other because they believed I was mistreating him. Now that he was financially independent, they thought it was time for him to make a fresh start, without me. The idea that my husband, my partner of 12 years, could entertain such a notion due to his family's malicious influence was nothing short of heart-wrenching. Looking directly at Albert, my gaze filled with a mixture of anger and betrayal. I watched as he quickly turned his eyes away, unable to meet mine. His family, on the other hand, seemed to relish the turmoil they had stirred up, suggesting it was for the best now that Albert was the primary earner. "So you're essentially kicking me out of our home?" I asked, incredulous. The response was cold and unyielding, steeped in the outdated belief that the man, as the head of the household, had the final say, regardless of our joint contributions. The injustice of it all ignited a fury within me I hadn't known I possessed. Without another word, I stood up, unable to contain the storm brewing inside me. I stormed off, packing only what I could carry, overwhelmed by a mix of sadness, anger, and disbelief. Seeking refuge at my best friend's house, I spent the night in tears, trying to make sense of how everything had spiraled so far down. But as the shock began to subside, a shift occurred within me. What had once been despair transformed into a fiery resolve. If they thought they could discard me so easily, they were mistaken. Determined to uncover the truth behind Albert's sudden financial success and the bonuses that had caught me off guard, I focused my energy on seeking justice, not out of vengeance, but to expose the lies and deceit that had been thrust upon me. The following morning, I called in sick, knowing that Albert would be at work. I used the time to return to our home and begin my search. It didn't take long to find evidence of his betrayal. In his office, I uncovered files and emails detailing Albert's embezzlement of company funds, a scheme involving our new boss. The evidence was damning. I saved everything to a USB drive, understanding the magnitude of what I had just discovered. Heart heavy, I packed more of my belongings, realizing that returning home was no longer an option. At my friend's house, I pieced together a detailed presentation of the evidence, preparing to expose the truth. The next day, I contacted HR and the company's higher-ups, requesting an urgent meeting. Keeping the details vague, I also informed Albert, under the guise of a fiscal planning emergency. When the meeting was set, I dressed carefully, knowing the weight of what was about to unfold. As I entered the conference room, I felt a mix of exhilaration and nerves. Albert and our boss arrived last, their faces betraying panic at the sight of the leadership team gathered. I took control, presenting the evidence of their embezzlement. The room shifted from curiosity to shock, then to outrage. Albert and the boss were visibly rattled. As the truth became undeniable, one executive even suggested jail time for their crimes. Throughout it all, Albert's glares burned with anger and betrayal. Despite his attempts to undermine me, I stood firm, driven by the need to expose the truth. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice. Albert, desperate and furious, shouted that I was lying and threatened to destroy me, even vowing divorce. His explosive reaction only further revealed the man he had become, driven by greed and desperation. As he attempted to storm out, security guards, whom I had stationed outside, blocked his path. The evidence was overwhelming, and the outcome was clear. Both Albert and our boss were dismissed and faced legal charges. Their departure was met with a media frenzy that I had orchestrated by tipping off journalists. The image of Albert, captured as he struggled to post bail, was a fitting testament to his actions and their consequences. In the days that followed, the investigation revealed that the scheme ran deeper, implicating my brother-in-law Roy, My in-laws, who had been so eager to remove me from our home, were not just acting out of disdain, they were removing an obstacle to their criminal enterprise. The revelation that my mother-in-law and sister-in-law might also be involved added another layer of betrayal to the situation. With Roy likely facing similar consequences, the full extent of their family's conspiracy came to light. Their collective downfall was harsh, but it was the necessary consequence of their actions. Meanwhile, I couldn't help but feel the panic that must be coursing through my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. They knew it was only a matter of time before their involvement was uncovered. Through all of this, I found myself grateful for uncovering the truth when I did, preventing even greater harm. My actions had not gone unnoticed. My company's leadership, recognizing my diligence and integrity, offered me a significant promotion, an acknowledgement of my hard work and resilience. I'll be stepping into my former boss's role next week, with a considerable pay increase and bonuses. Looking forward, I know the next step is divorce. Staying married to someone involved in criminal activities is simply not an option. With my stable financial situation and unblemished legal record, I'm confident custody of our children won't be a battle. The future ahead is bright, and I am genuinely excited for this new chapter. This marks a major turning point in my life, one where deceit is no longer part of my story. Actions have consequences, and in this case, it seems that everyone is finally facing their just rewards.
There's no mistake in our reservation for 7 people. I'd appreciate if you could prepare a separate seat for this lady who isn't included in the count. Elizabeth, my husband's mom, often made bold requests, teasing me. But today might be different because I know a secret she's hiding, and I plan to reveal it at our family gathering. I'm Natalie, 28 years old, and I work as a chef. I met my husband George at the restaurant where I work. He runs a long-standing electronics store in the city, passed down through his family. Sadly, his father, who ran the store before him, passed away last year. I grew up in a family passionate about cooking. My parents and brother are all culinary professionals. Surrounded by this environment, I learned a lot about cooking from a young age. Thanks to this and my talent, I graduated top of my class from culinary school. I used to be confident in my cooking skills, but marrying George made me doubt myself. We ended up living with his mom, Elizabeth, after his dad passed away. George wanted to take care of her, so we agreed to live together. I hoped for some time alone with George after our wedding, but living with his parents changed that plan. I knew he might eventually live with them, but not right after getting married. Maybe he didn't want to upset me by mentioning it earlier. Living with Elizabeth wasn't as bad as I thought. She was kind and helped with chores. She even bought me treats from my favorite bakery. But there was one issue. Her cooking was too salty for my taste. She prepared our meals, but they were always too salty. I knew Elizabeth was from the northern regions, so I assumed her love for salty food might be typical there. I'd read in magazines and seen on TV that northerners often prefer saltier tastes. However, I knew it wasn't true for everyone, like my colleague at work who's also from the north but likes lighter flavors. Elizabeth's cooking didn't match what I expected. Her dishes were much saltier than what I'd heard or what my colleague liked. Her stew, for example, had such a strong sauce that it overpowered the natural colors of the ingredients. It felt like eating pure sauce sometimes. Elizabeth would encourage me to eat more, saying that if the food wasn't flavorful enough, it wouldn't be satisfying. I'd often wonder if this was the standard taste. Once my husband mentioned that the dish seemed lighter than usual, and Elizabeth said she adjusted it to my liking. But even then, I found it too salty. I couldn't help but think, this is considered light. I was shocked by what happened next. Eating Elizabeth's heavily seasoned food every day seemed to dull my taste buds. I started doubting my ability to taste properly, especially when cooking at work. Luckily, the head chef did the final taste checks, so it didn't affect the dishes much. But it worried me a lot. To deal with Elizabeth's cooking, I started making my own breakfast before she woke up. It helped me keep up at work, but it made her cold towards me. She started ignoring me when I greeted her in the morning. One evening, I asked her opinion on a dish I'd worked hard on. She questioned if I'd seasoned it right, saying cooking basics were important. She added more sauce, saying it needed more flavor. It made me feel like she thought I was being arrogant about my cooking skills. But I was just worried about health issues. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was a reason behind Elizabeth's sudden change in behavior. My husband has 2 older sisters who welcomed me warmly into their families from the start of our marriage. They even offered to help if I ever had any problems with their mother. Their support made me feel valued even though we were just getting to know each other. Their husbands were also friendly, which added to the family's warmth. Especially Emily, who has a delightful 5-year-old daughter. We were preparing for her big birthday celebration, and I happily agreed to help with the food. The table was filled with a variety of dishes, each colorful and inviting. Emily praised the spaghetti I made, saying her daughter loved it. Her appreciation made me really happy. She even thanked me for the delicious spaghetti with sparkling eyes. Emily also shared a stew she made, which she was a bit shy about. She encouraged everyone to try it, especially her daughter. Emily's daughter frowned and refused the spicy stew, saying it made her mouth burn. She asked for more water after trying a bit, but her glass emptied quickly. Then she commented that her mom's cooking was usually heavy on seasoning, and today's was even more so. Her mom got angry and stormed off, ending the party abruptly. I regretted offering to help with the cooking, especially since Emily's daughter's comment seemed to upset her mom. It felt unfair for our efforts to be criticized like that. That night, I wanted to apologize to Emily, but I couldn't find the courage. When I finally did, she responded coldly, telling me not to act superior because it wasn't my house. Her response was sharper than I expected. Life became increasingly difficult from the next day onwards. Elizabeth would heavily season the meals I carefully prepared, and on the worst days, she'd even throw them away before finishing them. I turned to my husband for support, but he didn't take my distress seriously. He suggested that maybe I had antagonized her and needed to listen more. It felt like he wasn't understanding my feelings. To add to the strain, despite being married for only half a year, he started coming home late, sometimes not until midnight. He said it was because of work, but he even started missing important family events like Emily's daughter's birthday party. This put a further strain on our marriage. Just when I thought things couldn't get any tougher, Elizabeth had a bad fall down the stairs and seriously hurt her leg. Emily offered to help with her care, but Elizabeth insisted that it was my duty as her daughter-in-law to look after her. After that, my life changed completely. I had to attend to Elizabeth's needs all day, every day, from small tasks to big ones. Even at work, I'd get constant calls from her, disrupting my tasks. At first, my colleagues understood, but eventually, they got frustrated with the interruptions. I ended up resigning from my job. When I told Elizabeth about quitting, she seemed happy about it. Since then, my days have been filled with meeting her spontaneous demands at all hours. It's taken a toll on my mind and body. As my husband's absence at home grew, I couldn't shake my doubts about his excuses for working late. I started considering what our next steps should be. Feeling like I couldn't stand by any longer, I decided it was time to teach both Elizabeth and my husband a lesson. A few days later, during breakfast, I brought up the idea of divorce. They were both shocked by my sudden announcement. My husband questioned why I was bringing it up, reminding me that we were still newlyweds. He denied any suspicion of cheating and seemed hurt by the suggestion. He also pointed out that I rarely came home, and he felt belittled by Elizabeth. He said he couldn't be happy in such a household environment. "I've made my decision," I declared with newfound determination, surprising both of them. My husband quickly apologized, promising to be more attentive to our home life. He even suggested I take a break and go to my parents' house for a while if I needed it. However, he asked if I could still help Elizabeth due to her leg injury. His apology caught me off guard, but I sensed a hint of resentment in his tone. He urged me to reflect on what had happened and suggested we keep trying to live together. He hoped our feelings might change and things could improve. I replied tersely, saying I would think about it. Their smug smiles revealed their shared bond as family. The atmosphere at home improved briefly with my husband coming home earlier, but it didn't last. He started staying out late again, and Elizabeth returned to her cold behavior. Despite her injury, she frequently left the house. When I questioned her actions, I uncovered a shocking truth. My phone rang incessantly one day, with calls from my husband and Elizabeth. They demanded to know why I had left Elizabeth alone. I explained that I was at my parents' house, as we had agreed it would be temporary. But something had gone wrong. Amidst the commotion, I heard Elizabeth's voice in the background. I won't go back to that house. From now on, all communication should go through lawyers, I stated calmly before hanging up. For the next few days, I enjoyed the peace of my parents' home. They cooked my favorite meals, and I felt grateful for each one. In return, I cooked for them, and when my mother praised my cooking, tears of happiness filled my eyes. During this peaceful time, I got an unexpected message from someone I didn't want to hear from, Elizabeth. She apologized for her past actions and invited me to her upcoming birthday party. I didn't want to go, but the party was at a renowned restaurant, a rare luxury. I decided to attend and convey my intentions. Elizabeth was happier than I expected and shared the details. The day of the party arrived and the venue was an upscale restaurant near the station. It had become popular among food enthusiasts because of a new chef trained in France. His dishes were acclaimed as authentically French, earning rave reviews from gourmets in the city. Upon arriving at the main entrance of the restaurant, I observed George and Elizabeth awaiting my arrival with what appeared to be a smug expression. The attendees of the party included Emily, her husband, and her children, constituting a small gathering of 8 individuals. Notably, the topic of divorce had not been disclosed to the attendees at this juncture. Shortly thereafter, Elizabeth approached the restaurant staff and requested confirmation of the reservation, which was indicated for 7 individuals. She subsequently requested a separate seat for me, indicating an implicit acknowledgement of my presence. As we settled into our seats and began dining, Elizabeth's comment about the spaghetti tasting like mine warmed my heart. Then, George mentioned how the restaurant's dishes had improved since the new chef arrived, especially recommending a forthcoming meat dish. As we eagerly awaited the arrival of the anticipated meat dish, delicious-smelling plates kept arriving at Emily's table. However, George and Elizabeth hadn't received anything yet. Elizabeth's frustration became apparent as she loudly questioned why their food was taking so long, drawing glances from nearby diners. The waiter apologized, explaining that the chef was preparing something special for them, which was why it was taking longer. He asked for their patience a little longer. Despite Elizabeth's annoyance, there was a flicker of satisfaction on her face, knowing they were receiving special treatment. Soon, footsteps from the kitchen caught their attention. Their expressions froze in surprise as I emerged, dressed in a chef's hat and apron. "Natalie, why are you dressed like that?" Elizabeth questioned, while Emily and her husband seemed to enjoy the surprise. I smiled gently and placed the specially arranged dishes before them. "I've prepared a special menu just for the 2 of you," I announced as I placed the dishes before Elizabeth and George. Elizabeth's plate held a beautiful black lump adorned with a rich sauce, which I further enhanced with a topping. Seeing Elizabeth's surprised expression brought me satisfaction. For George, I presented a dish adorned with various delicacies, each shining brightly. I also provided a special sauce for him to try. Emily's daughter laughed cheerfully, appearing surprised yet intrigued by the unique service. However, George and Elizabeth reacted with anger. "This is unbelievable. I've never seen such inappropriate service. Call the manager," George demanded. I calmly replied, "I'm the person in charge here. Is there a problem?" Elizabeth joined in, accusing me of allowing disrespectful service and threatening to sue. "Feel free, but we're also considering legal action for the disruption you've caused," I responded firmly. "How dare you?" Elizabeth exclaimed in disbelief. It turned out that they were frequent visitors to the restaurant and were known for their demanding behavior and constant complaints. The staff had already viewed them as problematic customers until now. "Considering our familiar relationship, we've treated you with leniency. But now that Natalie has chosen to distance herself from you too, we will treat you impartially. Is that okay, Natalie?" The person in charge, who turned out to be my brother Peter, asked me. "Of course," I replied. Peter, Elizabeth, and George were utterly stunned to realize that the person in charge of the renowned restaurant was my brother. In reality, the restaurant's success was a result of Peter's diligent management and hard work. They had not been informed of this fact. Despite not attending our wedding due to work commitments, Peter had sent a generous gift. He had never spoken with Elizabeth or George before, but he remembered their faces from pictures he had received from family gatherings he couldn't attend. "I couldn't go to the wedding, so I wanted to say hi when you came to visit, but every time you guys seem too busy with your friends," Elizabeth told George and Emily. They looked surprised. "We didn't know. Can you tell us more?" Emily asked, trying to sound happy, but her eyes showed she was serious. We actually came here to eat with some store owners from the town's market. It's popular now to eat at these new restaurants, George explained. Just then, a waiter came up. You forgot this last time you were here, he said, handing Elizabeth a shiny earring. You often eat here with guys who wear earrings. Isn't that risky? I was surprised by Emily's question but laughed. Well, it's not exactly like that. He's secretly dating a woman who works at the flower shop across the street. George looked shocked. How did you find out? A few weeks ago, I felt suspicious and hired a detective. They took photos of him having dinner with her here and even going into a hotel together. To be honest, I don't think it was a good idea for you to marry her. I'm planning to get a divorce. Just be ready for that, George said, speaking openly about divorce for the first time. For me, it wasn't a surprise. I had expected it. Just remember to pay the alimony. Don't worry, I recently made a big business deal, so I'm financially stable now. I'll happily pay all the alimony, George assured. That reassured me. Now about you, Elizabeth. Elizabeth, who had been listening quietly, suddenly spoke up. She was a regular at this fancy restaurant and known by the staff. What do you want from me? Since my husband passed away, I don't think anyone can criticize me. But I knew something she didn't. Actually, I had a detective look into your secrets too. Turns out, you've been in a secret relationship for 5 years. But wait, didn't your husband just pass away a year ago? What's going on? Emily and her siblings were furious and disappointed. Their father had meant a lot to them, so this news was hard to take. I was surprised too, but when I asked the detective how he knew so much about Elizabeth, I found out that her father had hired the same detective agency before. You deceived him for so long, even while he was still alive. And George, even when you were with Natalie, you were seeing another woman. How could you? Emily and her siblings were furious and disappointed. Their father meant a lot to them, so this news was really tough to handle. The tense atmosphere at our table caught the attention of other diners. We promised to talk about it more at home and ended the dinner. As I left, I thanked the restaurant staff and Peter. A few days later, under Emily and her siblings' stern gaze, George and I started the formal divorce process. Now I'm free. I won't regret anything, no matter what, George said confidently. I never expected this. Even after I told you about my bad leg, I didn't think you'd treat me like this, Elizabeth said, surprised. Her leg had actually healed already, but she had pretended to be in pain to seem better than me. It shocked me again. From now on, both she and my husband will be strangers to me. Even though our marriage ended quickly, I have no regrets. A few days later, when I checked my bank account, I was surprised to find that both my husband's and his mistress's alimony payments had been deposited at the same time. It seemed like my husband covered her share too. With this knowledge, I could finally see them as completely out of my life. Then some interesting news came about my husband and his mistress. He had gotten into debt to pay the big alimony. But soon after we divorced, she dumped him easily. Emily told me that the woman is known in the area for going after married men. After what happened at the restaurant, Peter told us that regular customers were tired of George and Elizabeth's behavior, and they were happy we stood up to them. After that, the restaurant banned them from coming in. Their dishonesty became known in the community. A big contract my husband was bragging about got canceled. His electronics store relied on trust from the locals. But now that trust is gone, running it will be hard. Elizabeth's life got tough too. She was left by her longtime lover, and medical tests showed her unhealthy lifestyle was hurting her health. Her health problems were her own doing, so she didn't get much sympathy. Luckily, I got to go back to the Western-style restaurant where I used to work. Even though they knew about my past, the staff and bosses welcomed me warmly. Emily and her family, including the spaghetti lady, kept coming to the restaurant, which meant a lot to me. They had cut off all ties with George and Elizabeth. Their betrayal, especially after their dad passed away and the truth came out, hurt them deeply and seemed hard to get over. Cooking brings me so much joy. Those moments when I'm happy in the kitchen are the ones I treasure the most. It makes me feel truly blessed. Since I'm getting remarried, you'll need to move out. The $55,000 loan will be covered by my new partner," he said, his voice dripping with irony. Years of painstakingly working to pay off that loan left me stunned by his audacity to shift the burden onto his new wife. "Then, I guess the $5,000 monthly payments will be your responsibility now," I replied, making clear the true amount I had been shouldering all along. "Sign the divorce papers without delay," I continued, "and just leave. Whatever comes next, even if it's hell, doesn't matter to me anymore." I'm Meg Smith, a 41-year-old housewife who works part-time. My husband Mike is 3 years older than me, and we've been married for 10 years. We first met while working at the same company. Back then, I was deeply engrossed in my career and had little interest in marriage or romance. However, after turning 30, a colleague who was contemplating going independent persuaded me to switch jobs. Just as I was starting to settle into my new role, Mike, a senior colleague from my old company, confessed his love for me. From the start, my relationship with Mike, who was in his mid-30s, was viewed through the lens of marriage. However, 2 years later, we tied the knot, largely due to pressure from those around us. My in-laws were incredibly supportive, treating me like their own daughter, which allowed me to continue working without concerns. A year after our marriage, we built a house that reflected our dreams and desires. Although it was a significant investment, we secured a loan with a manageable repayment plan. This major purchase solidified our commitment to supporting each other. For the first 2 years, we lived as a typical working couple. However, in our 3rd year of marriage, as we began contemplating starting a family, Mike dropped the bombshell that he wanted to leave his job to start his own business. He had always dreamed of launching his business before turning 40 and had been quietly building his network and saving money. While the future of his venture was uncertain, his resolve was unwavering. By the time I discovered his plans, he had already resigned from his job. I felt disheartened by the lack of communication between us, especially since he seemed to assume that my income alone would cover our needs. Shortly after Mike launched his business, my father-in-law fell ill and was hospitalized. It became clear that returning to his previous lifestyle was no longer feasible, and his home would need extensive renovations for his post-discharge needs. Although my in-laws insisted they could manage on their own, Mike decided that our family would cover all the expenses. I wanted to support my in-laws as much as possible, so I agreed to help, but covering the entire cost was a different story. Our household expenses surged, and I was left bewildered. Our income simply couldn't sustain such a large financial burden. Mike's business was struggling, with frequent contract cancellations and few new opportunities. His income had dwindled to nearly nothing, and I was left to handle all living expenses and loan payments with my salary. Despite being nearly unemployed, Mike remained indifferent to our financial strain, dismissing my concerns and treating the situation as if it were someone else's problem. Our credit card bills began to soar as Mike frequently went out drinking, claiming it was for client relations. Faced with the possibility of spending our lives just paying off loans, I suggested we either sell the house or shut down the struggling business. Mike dismissed my proposals, insisting, "We're not on the brink of ruin. This is a time to endure." The only reason we were managing it all was because of my salary, and I was the one bearing the brunt of our financial strain. Mike couldn't grasp this reality. Eventually, I felt it was pointless to discuss anything with him as long as payments were made on time. As the situation dragged on, our daily conversations dwindled. I knew Mike was spending time with other women under the guise of work, but I had become indifferent to him. One day, after returning from work, Mike finally spoke to me after a long silence. With a smirk, he waved a piece of paper in front of me and said, "I've decided to divorce you. Please sign here." I took a deep breath and responded calmly, accepting both his words and the divorce papers. It was likely because I had been contemplating proposing a divorce myself if he hadn't acted first. "Can we wait a moment? I just got home. Let's discuss this in the living room," I suggested. "I thought you wanted to talk, but now you're rushing me," he asked, his tone irritated. "I don't need any unnecessary conversation, just get it over with," he snapped back. Deliberately took my time moving to the living room, sensing Mike's growing impatience. I resented how everything was unfolding on his terms and decided to prolong the moment a bit longer. Regardless, the decision to divorce was made. The days we had spent together in the house we built with so much care were coming to an end. I wanted to savor these final moments at my own pace. As I settled on the sofa, I picked up the divorce papers once more. They seemed flimsy compared to the marriage registration we had signed a decade ago, possibly reflecting my current state of mind. How long are you going to just stare at them? Mike asked, his tone edged with irritation. I have a question. What are your plans after the divorce? What do you mean? What am I going to do? Are you saying you're having second thoughts about the divorce? I'm going through with the divorce, but can we at least have a brief conversation before it's finalized? I'm planning to remarry, after all. Remarrying, huh? So there's someone else. She must be young, attractive, and financially successful, unlike me, an old lady who didn't even have children with you. So you're planning to take advantage of her next. Take advantage of her? What do you think of me? I'm simply laying out the facts. I've always handled the finances and you never had to worry about payments. Yet you act so superior. I can lead a better life without someone like you. The divorce is actually a favor for me. Sure. I'll brush off your bitter remarks as the ramblings of someone who's lost. Maybe I should have said more. Keep talking. The divorce is final, and I won't have to see your face much longer. So please move out by the end of the week. I'm leaving today. I can't stand hearing your voice any longer. By the way, does your new girlfriend know about the loans you're carrying? Of course she does. She's agreed to contribute $500 a month for living here. It's no big deal for her. She won't struggle with the loan payments like you did. Understood. After signing the divorce papers, I decided to leave with my belongings already packed. I'll leave the remaining furniture behind as part of the asset division. Dispose of it if you don't need it. Just go. And best wishes to your new girlfriend. Handling a $5,000 monthly loan payment will be challenging, but good luck. By the way, I've left a note detailing the loan information for her. With a smile, I handed Mike the note, got into my car, and drove away from my former home. I headed straight to City Hall to submit the divorce papers. I hadn't felt this relieved in a long time and thought I should have divorced sooner without worrying about him managing the loan payments. A week after the divorce, one morning, I received multiple calls from my ex-husband Mike. Though I had anticipated this, it was still quite irritating. I decided to address it and answered one of his calls. Yes, what do you want? I wouldn't be calling if it weren't important. That's quite rude, but is it true about the $5,000? I have no reason to lie. You're expecting me to cover your debt. I sighed deeply at his words. Maybe I should have explained everything more clearly instead of just relying on the note. Despite the inconvenience, all the details are laid out in that note. I thought you'd understand it if you read it. I'm calling because I still don't get it, even after reading. I'll break it down for you. Besides the mortgage on the house, there are the renovation costs for your parents' home that you chose, the personal loan for your father's medical expenses, the business loan for your venture, and the credit card debt you accrued, all under your name. If there were only a mortgage, I could have managed that, but there's much more. If you have doubts, you can verify it. I helped because I was your wife, but now that we're not, it's no longer my concern. I told you when I left that there's a monthly payment of $5,000. You must think this is a joke. You spent money like it was nothing. Did you ever consider these payments? Well, you'll have to deal with it with your new girlfriend. That's why you divorced me, right? Actually, she broke up with me. She said $5,000 a month is too much. I figured as much. It's understandable. Even someone with a high income would rarely agree to take on a $5,000 monthly payment for debts they didn't incur. No one wants to pay 10 times the value of a house over many years. Did you really earn that much after changing jobs? Yes, my salary increased fivefold after changing jobs, but all that income went straight to repayments. I didn't realize you were making so much. I wouldn't have suggested divorce if I had known. It's not that you didn't know, you just weren't interested. After I switched jobs, you never asked about my work or my salary. You should have brought it up yourself. You never discussed your income either, even when we worked together. You barely communicated. Once you went independent and had little to no income, yet continued to spend recklessly, I figured it was pointless to bring it up. Let's start over. Come back. I refuse. I've finally achieved my freedom. Then what about the payments? $5,000 a month is unmanageable. Sell the house and use your income to pay off the remaining debt. You might be able to handle it if you adjust the repayment plan. Why not continue with the payments? I have no involvement with you anymore. I'm not interested in a stranger's debts. You're incredibly cold. Don't you have any empathy? I may seem cold, but I've been making substantial payments for over 6 years. Part of it was out of love for you, and part of it was because I felt obligated to your parents. If you wanted to come back, it might have been different. But you chose the divorce on your own. Technically, I have the right to sell the house, divide the assets, and even claim alimony for adultery. But I wanted to sever ties with you before dealing with that. I'm done with someone who turns their own money into a facade of wealth and squanders everything. I'm exhausted from covering your reckless debts. My life is my own now. Don't involve me in it any further. With that, I ended the call. Mike ceased to interfere in my life after that. The relief I felt when everything was finally settled was immense. Later, I learned that Mike had to give up his job and the house and create a new repayment plan for the loans. Returning to his previous job under the scrutiny of others must have been uncomfortable. Despite this, he would continue to be burdened by loan payments. I'd also heard that his parents decided to sell their house and move to a retirement home. It saddened me to think they wouldn't have faced such a choice if we hadn't divorced. I assisted with their move and contributed financially to their entry fees as a way to repay the kindness they had shown me. I hope they can now enjoy a peaceful life without the strain of $5,000 monthly payments. I can live comfortably by being naturally frugal, and my savings have steadily increased. I'm also looking into investing to secure my financial future. Currently, I'm moving forward with a new partner I met after my divorce, and I'm enjoying fulfilling days both professionally and personally. Since I'm getting remarried, you'll need to move out. The $55,000 loan will be covered by my new partner, he said, his voice dripping with irony. Years of painstakingly working to pay off that loan left me stunned by his audacity to shift the burden onto his new wife. Then, I guess the $5,000 monthly payments will be your responsibility now, I replied, making clear the true amount I had been shouldering all along. Sign the divorce papers without delay, I continued, and just leave. Whatever comes next, even if it's hell, doesn't matter to me anymore. I'm Meg Smith, a 41-year-old housewife who works part-time. My husband Mike is 3 years older than me, and we've been married for 10 years. We first met while working at the same company. Back then, I was deeply engrossed in my career and had little interest in marriage or romance. However, after turning 30, a colleague who was contemplating going independent persuaded me to switch jobs. Just as I was starting to settle into my new role, Mike, a senior colleague from my old company, confessed his love for me. From the start, my relationship with Mike, who was in his mid-30s, was viewed through the lens of marriage. However, 2 years later, we tied the knot, largely due to pressure from those around us. My in-laws were incredibly supportive, treating me like their own daughter, which allowed me to continue working without concerns. A year after our marriage, we built a house that reflected our dreams and desires. Although it was a significant investment, we secured a loan with a manageable repayment plan. This major purchase solidified our commitment to supporting each other. For the first 2 years, we lived as a typical working couple. However, in our 3rd year of marriage, as we began contemplating starting a family, Mike dropped the bombshell that he wanted to leave his job to start his own business. He had always dreamed of launching his business before turning 40 and had been quietly building his network and saving money. While the future of his venture was uncertain, his resolve was unwavering. By the time I discovered his plans, he had already resigned from his job. I felt disheartened by the lack of communication between us, especially since he seemed to assume that my income alone would cover our needs. Shortly after Mike launched his business, my father-in-law fell ill and was hospitalized. It became clear that returning to his previous lifestyle was no longer feasible, and his home would need extensive renovations for his post-discharge needs. Although my in-laws insisted they could manage on their own, Mike decided that our family would cover all the expenses. I wanted to support my in-laws as much as possible, so I agreed to help, but covering the entire cost was a different story. Our household expenses surged, and I was left bewildered. Our income simply couldn't sustain such a large financial burden. Mike's business was struggling, with frequent contract cancellations and few new opportunities. His income had dwindled to nearly nothing, and I was left to handle all living expenses and loan payments with my salary. Despite being nearly unemployed, Mike remained indifferent to our financial strain, dismissing my concerns and treating the situation as if it were someone else's problem. Our credit card bills began to soar as Mike frequently went out drinking, claiming it was for client relations. Faced with the possibility of spending our lives just paying off loans, I suggested we either sell the house or shut down the struggling business. Mike dismissed my proposals, insisting, "We're not on the brink of ruin. This is a time to endure." The only reason we were managing it all was because of my salary, and I was the one bearing the brunt of our financial strain. Mike couldn't grasp this reality. Eventually, I felt it was pointless to discuss anything with him as long as payments were made on time. As the situation dragged on, our daily conversations dwindled. I knew Mike was spending time with other women under the guise of work, but I had become indifferent to him. One day, after returning from work, Mike finally spoke to me after a long silence. With a smirk, he waved a piece of paper in front of me and said, "I've decided to divorce you. Please sign here." I took a deep breath and responded calmly, accepting both his words and the divorce papers. It was likely because I had been contemplating proposing a divorce myself if he hadn't acted first. "Can we wait a moment? I just got home. Let's discuss this in the living room," I suggested. "I thought you wanted to talk, but now you're rushing me," he asked, his tone irritated. "I don't need any unnecessary conversation, just get it over with," he snapped back. Deliberately took my time moving to the living room, sensing Mike's growing impatience. I resented how everything was unfolding on his terms and decided to prolong the moment a bit longer. Regardless, the decision to divorce was made. The days we had spent together in the house we built with so much care were coming to an end. I wanted to savor these final moments at my own pace. As I settled on the sofa, I picked up the divorce papers once more. They seemed flimsy compared to the marriage registration we had signed a decade ago, possibly reflecting my current state of mind. "How long are you going to just stare at them?" Mike asked, his tone edged with irritation. "I have a question. What are your plans after the divorce?" "What do you mean? What am I going to do? Are you saying you're having second thoughts about the divorce?" "I'm going through with the divorce, but can we at least have a brief conversation before it's finalized? I'm planning to remarry, after all." "Remarrying, huh? So there's someone else. She must be young, attractive, and financially successful, unlike me, an old lady who didn't even have children with you. So you're planning to take advantage of her next." "Take advantage of her? What do you think of me?" "I'm simply laying out the facts. I've always handled the finances and you never had to worry about payments. Yet you act so superior. I can lead a better life without someone like you. The divorce is actually a favor for me." Sure. I'll brush off your bitter remarks as the ramblings of someone who's lost. Maybe I should have said more. "Keep talking. The divorce is final, and I won't have to see your face much longer. So please move out by the end of the week. I'm leaving today. I can't stand hearing your voice any longer. By the way, does your new girlfriend know about the loans you're carrying?" "Of course she does. She's agreed to contribute $500 a month for living here. It's no big deal for her. She won't struggle with the loan payments like you did." "Understood." After signing the divorce papers, I decided to leave with my belongings already packed. "I'll leave the remaining furniture behind as part of the asset division. Dispose of it if you don't need it. Just go. And best wishes to your new girlfriend. Handling a $5,000 monthly loan payment will be challenging, but good luck. By the way, I've left a note detailing the loan information for her." With a smile, I handed Mike the note, got into my car, and drove away from my former home. I headed straight to City Hall to submit the divorce papers. I hadn't felt this relieved in a long time and thought I should have divorced sooner without worrying about him managing the loan payments. A week after the divorce, one morning, I received multiple calls from my ex-husband, Mike. Though I had anticipated this, it was still quite irritating. I decided to address it and answered one of his calls. "Yes, what do you want?" "I wouldn't be calling if it weren't important." "That's quite rude, but is it true about the $5,000? I have no reason to lie. You're expecting me to cover your debt." I sighed deeply at his words. Maybe I should have explained everything more clearly instead of just relying on the note. Despite the inconvenience, all the details are laid out in that note. I thought you'd understand it if you read it. "I'm calling because I still don't get it, even after reading." I'll break it down for you. Besides the mortgage on the house, there are the renovation costs for your parents' home that you chose, the personal loan for your father's medical expenses, the business loan for your venture, and the credit card debt you accrued, all under your name. If there were only a mortgage, I could have managed that, but there's much more. If you have doubts, you can verify it. I helped because I was your wife, but now that we're not, it's no longer my concern. I told you when I left that there's a monthly payment of $5,000. You must think this is a joke. You spent money like it was nothing. Did you ever consider these payments? Well, you'll have to deal with it with your new girlfriend. That's why you divorced me, right? Actually, she broke up with me. She said $5,000 a month is too much. I figured as much. It's understandable. Even someone with a high income would rarely agree to take on a $5,000 monthly payment for debts they didn't incur. No one wants to pay 10 times the value of a house over many years. Did you really earn that much after changing jobs? Yes, my salary increased fivefold after changing jobs, but all that income went straight to repayments. I didn't realize you were making so much. I wouldn't have suggested divorce if I had known. It's not that you didn't know, you just weren't interested. After I switched jobs, you never asked about my work or my salary. You should have brought it up yourself. You never discussed your income either, even when we worked together. You barely communicated. Once you went independent and had little to no income, yet continued to spend recklessly, I figured it was pointless to bring it up. Let's start over. Come back. I refuse. I finally achieved my freedom. Then what about the payments? $5,000 a month is unmanageable. Sell the house and use your income to pay off the remaining debt. You might be able to handle it if you adjust the repayment plan. Why not continue with the payments? I have no involvement with you anymore. I'm not interested in a stranger's debts. You're incredibly cold. Don't you have any empathy? I may seem cold, but I've been making substantial payments for over 6 years. Part of it was out of love for you, and part of it was because I felt obligated to your parents. If you wanted to come back, it might have been different. But you chose the divorce on your own. Technically, I have the right to sell the house, divide the assets, and even claim alimony for adultery. But I wanted to sever ties with you before dealing with that. I'm done with someone who turns their own money into a facade of wealth and squanders everything. I'm exhausted from covering your reckless debts. My life is my own now. Don't involve me in it any further. With that, I ended the call. Mike ceased to interfere in my life after that. The relief I felt when everything was finally settled was immense. Later, I learned that Mike had to give up his job and the house and create a new repayment plan for the loans. Returning to his previous job under the scrutiny of others must have been uncomfortable. Despite this, he would continue to be burdened by loan payments. I'd also heard that his parents decided to sell their house and move to a retirement home. It saddened me to think they wouldn't have faced such a choice if we hadn't divorced. I assisted with their move and contributed financially to their entry fees as a way to repay the kindness they had shown me. I hope they can now enjoy a peaceful life without the strain of $5,000 monthly payments. I can live comfortably by being naturally frugal, and my savings have steadily increased. I'm also looking into investing to secure my financial future. Currently, I'm moving forward with a new partner I met after my divorce, and I'm enjoying fulfilling days both professionally and personally.
Hi, my name is Patricia. I'm 32 years old, a spirited and independent woman. Let me take you on the roller coaster ride that is my marriage to Austin. It's quite the saga, so buckle up. Austin and I, like any couple, have had our share of highs and lows. I love him deeply, but there has always been a shadow over our relationship. His mother, Martha, no matter how hard I tried, nothing I did seemed to satisfy her. At family gatherings, she'd critique my cooking as if she were a Michelin star chef, nitpicking everything from the flavor to the presentation. It didn't stop there. Martha had a way of belittling my accomplishments too. When I shared the exciting news of a promotion at work during a dinner party, she dismissed it with a casual remark about her friend's children achieving far greater things. Even our wedding day wasn't spared. She whispered her disapproval to anyone who'd listen, casting a shadow over what should have been one of the happiest days of my life. You'd think Austin would defend me, but he seemed blind to her behavior. His silence cut deeper than Martha's words. I wished he'd stand up for me. For us. His father, Raymond, would occasionally call out Martha's actions, but I needed Austin to do it. Each time he remained passive. It felt like a small, sharp cut, a painful reminder that I wasn't his priority. Over time, my frustration grew. It wasn't just about Martha's critiques. It was about Austin's inability, or unwillingness, to stand by my side. The tension reached a boiling point when Austin announced a sudden business trip to Florida, just days after returning from another one. Another trip? Really, Austin? I asked, bewildered. It's an important meeting. It can't wait, he replied, brushing off my concerns. Why Florida? And why now? Can't someone else handle it? His vague explanations only fueled my suspicions, but I didn't press the issue further. Instead, I tried to convince myself it was just business, though doubt lingered in my mind. As the trip progressed, things felt increasingly off. Austin insisted on audio calls instead of FaceTime, blaming poor hotel Wi-Fi. Babe, don't worry, he said, but his reassurances didn't sit right. Once, during a call, I heard a woman's voice in the background. When I asked about it, he brushed it off, claiming it was just hotel staff. The trust that anchored our relationship began to crack. Conversations grew shorter, and his excuses felt more implausible. By the fourth day, I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling that something was wrong. I attempted to FaceTime him again, desperate for clarity. This time, when the call connected, it wasn't Austin who appeared on the screen, it was Martha. She was lounging in a beach chair, wearing sunglasses, looking utterly relaxed. Martha, what are you doing there? Where's Austin? I asked, my voice trembling with shock. With a smug smile, she replied, Oh, Patricia, dear, you didn't really think he was on a business trip, did you? Honestly, he didn't need to hide this from you, but I suppose it shows how pushy you can be. Her words hit me like a slap. Austin had lied to me, and there was his mother, basking in the sun, as if her betrayal was nothing. So, you're telling me you both planned a secret vacation without me? I demanded, anger bubbling up inside. Well, yes, she admitted nonchalantly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I pressed for answers, needing to understand. I wanted to visit my hometown, and I wanted to do it with my son. Is that really so wrong? Martha responded as though it were the most natural thing in the world, completely dismissing my feelings. Her nonchalant attitude toward their deceit was beyond frustrating. It felt like a betrayal. Why did you feel the need to keep this a secret? Why leave me out? I asked, my voice heavy with confusion and hurt. Martha answered calmly, this trip was meant just for me and my son. It's our special time together. I couldn't hide my dismay, but I'm his wife, shouldn't I be included? This could have been an opportunity for us to work through things, and honestly, I could have used a break, too. Her response was blunt, almost indifferent. Well, you didn't get a vacation, sorry about that, but that's just how it is. Her dismissive tone stung, but I tried to keep my composure, setting aside your attitude for a moment. I just want to make it clear, even if you planned this trip without me, I could have handled it if you'd been honest from the start. The secrecy isn't necessary. Martha, however, didn't hold back. We kept it a secret because we didn't want you to know. It wasn't about whether you'd mind or not. We just didn't want you to be a part of it. Your constant calls, though, made us tell you the truth. I was stunned. Are you serious? Martha, what has happened to you? She rolled her eyes, her tone dismissive. Oh, stop overreacting. You're blowing this out of proportion, as usual. I fought back the rising frustration. I'm not being dramatic. After all these years of dealing with your difficult attitude, I have every right to feel upset. Martha tried to downplay the situation. Oh, Patricia dear, sometimes it's better not to know everything your husband does. It was just a small getaway, a special moment for us. You wouldn't understand. Her words stung like a slap. Betrayal, anger, and sadness hit me all at once. They had planned this intentionally, keeping me completely in the dark. The weight of their secrecy made me question what else they might have hidden from me. How often had these secret trips taken place? Why had they gone to such lengths to exclude me? As the trust one had in Austin began to crack, I was interrupted by his voice, tense and strained. Mom, why did you pick up the phone? What's going on? Martha's voice was firm. It's time Patricia knew the truth. It's been 5 days. Austin quickly snatched the phone from her, his face draining of color as he realized how deeply his lies had entangled him. He looked at the screen, knowing he was caught. Why did you lie about the business trip? Austin, the Wi-Fi was working fine the past few days, wasn't it? I demanded, my anger and confusion building. I didn't want to upset you, he admitted sheepishly. Well, of course, I'm upset, I snapped. I thought you were avoiding me. It's odd that you want to spend time with your mom, but Austin, you've been neglecting our relationship. I felt distant from you. If you just wanted time with her, you should have been honest. Even if I'd been disappointed about not being invited, it would have been better than feeling like you were keeping secrets from me. Austin tried to justify his actions, but it was clear he hadn't thought through how this would affect me. Austin, I said, frustration rising in my chest, I wouldn't have been upset if you'd just been honest. It's not about the trip, it's about the secrecy. And honestly, when I heard women's voices in the background during your calls, I started to think you might be cheating. I exclaimed, the hurt in my voice unmistakable. What? No way, Austin shot back, clearly shocked by my accusation. Yeah, well, when you keep things from me, what am I supposed to think? I replied bitterly. I have a special bond with my mom. Sometimes we just need our space, Austin tried to explain. In Florida? Of all places? You both hate Florida, and what about visiting Jess? Weren't we supposed to see her together? My questions hung in the air, unanswered, and I could feel the weight of my disappointment growing. The inconsistencies in his story were impossible to ignore. I confronted him, my voice firm. So this secret was just between you and your mom? Did your dad even know about it? Austin stuttered, I can't talk right now. Well, I hope this trip was worth it, I said, my voice unwavering, because when you come back, you might not have a wife to return to. Austin, please just wait, he pleaded, but I had no patience left. I ended the call and blocked any further attempts from him to reach me. Alone in my room, I paced back and forth, overwhelmed by a storm of confusion and anger. Why would Austin hide something so trivial? One thing I'd always believed was that small lies often pointed to bigger secrets. The idea of Austin secretly spending time with his mom was almost absurd. Part of me wished it was something as simple as an affair, something I could at least understand. His distant, secretive behavior, and his mother's meddling, however, were harder to grasp. I knew I needed advice from someone who might understand, so I decided to call my father-in-law, hoping he could shed some light on the situation. Hey, it's Patricia. I need to talk to you about something important, I said as soon as he answered. I poured out everything, the deception that was straining my marriage, the betrayal that was swirling inside me. I told him how Austin had fabricated a story about a business trip and how Martha seemed to revel in keeping me out of the loop, enjoying the control it gave her over our relationship. The weight of their deceit was suffocating. I could hear Raymond's shock and hurt in his voice. What? I had no idea about any of this. I'm so sorry, Patricia, he said, his tone serious and filled with concern. He paused for a moment before continuing. Martha told me she was going to Florida to mend things with her mother. I believed her. I corrected him, my voice firm. Austin just confessed. They weren't planning to visit Jessica at all. She doesn't even know about any supposed visit. Raymond's reaction confirmed how blindsided he was. I can't believe Martha would orchestrate something like this, he said, clearly dismayed by the web of lies his wife had spun, entangling all of us. It's one thing to disagree, but deceiving your own family? That's something else entirely. It's unforgivable. I felt the same. The deceit was too deep to simply overlook. They both need to learn a lesson, I replied, my anger fueling a new determination to set things right. Our conversation ended with plans and mutual encouragement to face what was ahead. I hung up, eagerly awaiting the outcome of Raymond's conversation with Jessica. Hours later, he called back with updates that only deepened the gravity of the situation. His voice trembled with a mix of anger and sorrow as he recounted the details. I told her everything, Patricia. Jessica was furious, absolutely devastated. She couldn't believe her daughter would go this far and deceive everyone, Raymond explained. She deserves to know the truth. Martha's been unbearable for too long, I replied, still reeling from the betrayal. Well, Jessica's ready to take matters into her own hands. She's planning to give Martha a lesson she won't soon forget. She's fed up with Martha's antics and wants to show her what true rudeness looks like, Raymond continued. Curious about the deeper issues at play, I asked, what exactly is the issue between Martha and Jessica? Raymond sighed before responding. It's quite ironic, Patricia. Martha's always claimed that her mother was rude and cruel to her. They've had a rocky relationship ever since Martha ran away, and it's been toxic, with years of being in and out of contact. But after speaking with Jessica for the past hour, I'm beginning to think that Martha might have been the problem all along. He paused, reflecting on the broader implications. It's crazy, I've been married to Martha for all these years, and yet you've uncovered more about our family secrets in this short time than I ever did. I should have been more curious. The revelations were startling, casting new light on the family dynamics and hinting at deep-seated issues that had been simmering beneath the surface. I should have been more assertive, Raymond lamented. How could you have known? I reassured him. Don't be too hard on yourself. You were just trusting your wife, being a good husband, and you've stepped up more than Austin has. That counts for something. Thanks, Patricia. I appreciate everything. I'm glad I could help, though it's unfortunate it had to come to this. Yeah, I guess so, but I'm looking forward to seeing Jessica show them her true colors, Raymond responded, a mix of anticipation and relief in his voice. The next day, the fallout from our revelations began to unfold. Austin, failing to grasp the full seriousness of the situation, called me, clearly agitated. Patricia, what did you do? He demanded. What do you mean? I replied, trying to remain calm. Don't play dumb with me. Jessica is here, and nobody else knew we were in town except you. She said she came because she heard we were here. His frustration was palpable, and I could hear a commotion in the background, likely Jessica confronting Martha. I'm glad she knows the truth. Everyone deserves to. After all your sneaking around, I shot back. How could you do this, Patricia? I could hear Martha's voice now, angry and accusatory. You ungrateful little rat. How dare you expose us like this? I couldn't help but chuckle softly, though my laughter was tinged with bitterness. Before I could respond, another voice, stern and authoritative, cut in. Don't you dare speak to that young lady like that, Raymond interjected. I've had enough of your insolence. You've been telling everyone how rude and nasty I was to you, huh? When all I did was care for you and help you out of trouble. You were such a problem child, lying about everything and being nasty to everyone. And I see that lifestyle has followed you into adulthood. The argument escalated, and I heard the sound of something breaking, likely a glass or a vase. The intensity of the shouting made me slightly fearful, but I quickly realized this was the consequence of Austin's actions. He was an adult, responsible for his choices. Over the next few days, Austin repeatedly asked for my forgiveness, claiming his grandmother was driving him crazy. Each time he called, I reminded him that this was his own doing. Meanwhile, Martha and Jessica continued their heated exchanges. I was surprised they hadn't been kicked out of the hotel where they were staying, given the chaos. As their 10-day trip neared its end, Austin revealed something even more shocking. Patricia, please, you need to talk to Jessica, he pleaded. I tried talking to Dad, but he's still upset with Mom and me. Slow down, what's going on? Weren't you two supposed to be coming back? I thought you learned your lesson, I asked, trying to keep up with the unfolding drama. Well, Jessica doesn't think, Austin started, hinting that the troubles were far from over. She intends to join us on the flight, hoping to follow us back and make sure my mother behaves like a dignified adult, rather than acting like an unruly teenager. Wow, that's quite the surprise, I replied, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Perhaps next time you'll advocate for what's right instead of participating in your mother's plots. I'll see you when you get back, I concluded, ending the call. Patricia, I'm sorry for everything. Haven't you punished us enough? Please, talk to Jessica and convince her not to come with us, Austin implored, his desperation evident. I don't think so, dear. It's not my place to stop her. She's quite formidable, I replied dismissively. How do you think that makes us feel? Austin pressed. Honestly, your feelings aren't my concern right now. You've misled me for far too long, and you never defended me when your mom mistreated me. Now you're just experiencing the consequences. Don't be upset with me. Have a safe trip, or at least as safe as it can be with those two together, I asserted firmly before ending the call. A sense of vindication enveloped me, realizing that I had finally confronted the persistent negativity in our lives. Jessica, our unexpected champion, had initiated her form of retribution, igniting a spark of anticipation within me. Now, I looked forward to their return, eager to hear the stories Jessica would undoubtedly have, imagining her making their flight a challenge. The taste of revenge was indeed delicious. Hello, my name is Patricia, and I'm 38 years old. It's a sad reality, but many women have faced cruelty from their in-laws, and I'm no exception. However, my experience is unique, one that many may struggle to relate to, especially when it comes to standing up for oneself and seeking justice. But in my case, I was fortunate enough to change my situation, and I'm sharing my story in hopes that it might inspire others going through similar struggles to fight back against the mistreatment they face. Everything changed the day my husband, Andrew, came to me with some heavy news. He said, "I need to tell you something important." Naturally, I was concerned and asked if everything was okay. His answer was a grave no, and then he confessed something that would alter the course of everything. He had witnessed his mother and sister committing a terrible act. This moment was a turning point because, until then, Andrew had always dismissed my complaints about his mother, Susan, and sister, Lisa. They had made it their mission to belittle and embarrass me, from ruining my clothes at family events to tampering with my food and drinks, ensuring I'd make a fool of myself in public. They even went as far as slandering my business. They were upset that I had taken their precious boy away, despite my constant attempts to explain their behavior, but Andrew had never taken my side, until now. I asked him what made him finally see the truth, and with a heavy sigh, he showed me security footage from our business, proof of their malicious acts. Together, Andrew and I run a business specializing in crochet, offering everything from baby clothes to handbags. It had been my brainchild, and we were thriving, until Susan and Lisa began their efforts to discourage me from pursuing this dream. They doubted my abilities, insulting me by suggesting I wasn't smart or skilled enough to be a business owner. They hinted that I would be better off as a homemaker or an employee rather than chasing my entrepreneurial dreams. It was clear to me that their constant undermining was rooted in jealousy. Why else would they go to such lengths to hold me back from something that brought me joy? Until now, Andrew had been blind to their cruelty, despite my tearful explanations and the evidence of spoiled food, ruined dresses, and their unwarranted criticisms of my business. But the proof he saw changed everything. The footage was shocking: two figures, masked but unmistakably feminine, one taller and the other shorter, vandalizing our shop with spray paint. Then, Andrew pointed out a detail I had missed: a distinctive necklace worn by one of the vandals. It was an exact match to a piece he had given his mother, Susan, during our trip to Hawaii. I felt a wave of validation wash over me as I realized the truth. "I see what you mean," I said, finally feeling heard. "It must be them." The floodgates opened, and I was overwhelmed with a mix of emotions: frustration and pain from Andrew's delayed acknowledgement of my struggles, coupled with a sense of relief that he finally understood what I had been enduring. I hesitated to directly accuse his family, considering their relationship, but I also longed for justice and wondered how to confront their sabotage. Just then, Andrew received a call from Lisa, which seemed almost like fate. She told him about the upcoming family reunion to welcome Uncle Jacob home for the weekend. "Are you planning to confront them about what we discovered?" I asked, unsure of Andrew's stance. He confessed that he was torn between loyalty to his family and standing by me. "I want to, but it's difficult. That's my mother and sister," he admitted. Yet, he reassured me, "If you decide to confront them, I'll support you in every way possible." As the weekend approached, we found ourselves at a crossroads: confront Susan and Lisa with the truth, or find another way to address the injustice they had caused. Andrew's willingness to support me, despite the complexity of the situation, marked a pivotal moment in our fight against the relentless hostility of his family. On the day of the reunion, we made our way to Susan's house early, eager to help with the preparations for the big family feast celebrating Uncle Jacob's return. His homecoming was a major event, given his beloved status and long absence. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation for the joyous reunion ahead. However, upon our arrival, I immediately sensed a shift. Susan and Lisa, who had always greeted us with warmth, suddenly wore expressions of thinly veiled jealousy and disdain at our presence. "Oh, you two are here early?" Susan remarked, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Yeah, Mom, we thought we'd come by to help out with the crowd," Andrew replied, ever the peacemaker. "Aren't you just the kindest?" she responded, though her eyes were anything but kind as they landed on me, as if accusing me of some unspoken crime. Then, with the smoothness of a serpent, Susan commented on the vandalism of our shop, a tragedy she had conveniently noticed. Lisa quickly chimed in, echoing her mother's feigned sorrow. Their performance was almost laughable. If not for the venom beneath their words, they could barely contain their glee, almost breaking into laughter at the deceit they had so carefully crafted. I bit back my anger, choosing to feign ignorance. Now wasn't the time for confrontation. I waited for the perfect moment to expose their treachery. Andrew played along, careful not to rock the boat too soon. We spoke in unison, our words dripping with irony. It's devastating, truly. We can't imagine who would do such a thing. Their reaction to the mention of involving the police was just as defensive as I'd expected. Lisa hastily cut in, trying to downplay the incident. Police for a minor act? Surely it was just kids messing around. Oh, Lisa, it's heartwarming how you worry about these kids, I replied, my voice thick with sarcasm. But regardless of their intentions, they need to be held accountable. After all, ignorance isn't a valid excuse for such actions. Our exchange wasn't just small talk. It was a game of strategy, and I was biding my time, waiting for the right moment to fully expose their malicious behavior. The day was still young, and the feast had only just begun. Susan, trying to support Lisa's minimization of the situation, chimed in with her usual condescending tone. Remember the foolish things you did as a teenager? Let's not overthink this. We have a party to prepare for. Her words were an attempt to dismiss the vandalism as youthful folly, but I could see it clearly. Our mention of police involvement had rattled them. Despite their attempts to appear unfazed, the tension in the air was undeniable. Andrew and I exchanged a silent, meaningful glance, an unspoken agreement passing between us to maintain our act. We joined the others in preparing for the party, cooking, cleaning, and setting up. By 4 p.m. The house was buzzing with the arrival of family members, and the long-anticipated reunion was in full swing. In the midst of the chaos, Andrew pulled me aside, his face serious. He handed me a concealed microphone. "Wear this," he whispered, his voice tinged with a mix of regret and determination. "I know I'm not confrontational enough to go directly against my mother and sister. I'm not the assertive figure you hoped for, but this way, you can uncover the truth on your terms. You're stronger than me. With this mic, you can gather the evidence we need for justice." I understood what he was offering, a different kind of support, one that played to my strength. I clipped the microphone on, hit the record button, and began my covert mission. It didn't take long before I found Susan and Lisa in the kitchen, engaged in a heated conversation. I lingered by the door, careful not to alert them to my presence. Lisa's voice was tinged with anxiety. "She knows everything. Mom, didn't you see how she was looking at us?" "Quiet, Lisa. You're being paranoid," Susan replied sharply, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. "She has no idea it was us." "I'm telling you, she knows. I can feel it," Lisa insisted, her panic rising. "Even if she suspects something, what can she really do about it?" Susan countered, attempting to soothe Lisa's nerves. "Remember, Andrew is on our side, and she loves Andrew. If she found out and tried to tell him, he'd never believe her over us." Their words were more than just a confession. They were a damning revelation of their true nature. The conversation was a detailed map of their schemes, from ruining my dress before a big presentation to spoiling my food and drinks, all in an effort to undermine me. They believed that Andrew's loyalty to them would always outweigh any doubts about their behavior, keeping their misdeeds safe from punishment. As the weight of their betrayal sank in, I could no longer contain my frustration. I'd intended to gather more evidence quietly, but the truth was out, and I was done playing their game. It was time to confront them directly. I worried that the microphone might not have captured their admissions clearly from a distance. It was critical to get closer, not just to ensure the recording was solid, but to confront them face to face. I barged into the room, feigning innocence. "Hey, is there anything else we need to do before Uncle Jacob arrives?" I asked, startling them. Their reactions were a mix of surprise and feigned concern, with Susan immediately chastising me for giving her a fright, claiming she had a weak heart. I couldn't resist a sarcastic jab. "Not too weak, it seems," I replied, hinting at her unexpected vitality for someone her age. Curious, Susan pressed, asking what I meant. I took the bait, insinuating that I'd recently seen her in some rather energetic, if not questionable, activities, dressed all in black and wearing a mask. They froze at my description, and the brief pause was enough to tell me I'd struck a nerve. I pushed further, alluding to having witnessed something incriminating. Their defense came fast but nervous, a weak attempt to feign ignorance. I upped the stakes, suggesting there might have been another masked accomplice involved in these shady deeds. Their denial faltered, and that's when I decided it was time to reveal my trump card. Ignoring their attempts to deflect, I pulled out the video Andrew had shown me, undeniable proof of their malice. The footage played on my phone, and their faces drained of color. The silence that followed was a moment of pure triumph. not just for confronting them but for standing up against their relentless efforts to undermine me. The evidence was irrefutable, and it marked a turning point in our ongoing family drama. Still, they tried to deny it, brushing off the situation as something trivial, but I held my ground, emphasizing the gravity of their actions. "This is a very serious matter," I insisted, pushing the phone closer to them. I could see their expressions shift from arrogance to panic as they realized the footage directly implicated them in the vandalism against my business. Lisa quickly attempted to deflect, but Susan, desperate, hissed for silence. The pressure was too much for Lisa to bear, and, out of guilt and fear, she finally confessed. Susan's denial crumbled in an instant as Lisa admitted their crime, leaving them no escape. But rather than take responsibility, their tone shifted from confession to defiance. They taunted me, thinking their connection to Andrew would make them untouchable. They were wrong. I met their challenge head-on. "Andrew's affection for you may be strong, and maybe he won't intervene," I shot back. "But what makes you think I'll stand idly by after you targeted my business?" "My passion?" My voice was unwavering, my resolve clear. In a desperate attempt to erase their confession, they lunged for my phone, but I was faster, sidestepping them with ease. They threatened me, but I remained unfazed, fully aware that the evidence was securely backed up beyond their reach. "Even if you manage to take this phone from me," I said coolly, "the evidence is already secured elsewhere. Making threats now only worsens your situation." I stood my ground, warning them that their intimidation tactics wouldn't work on me. Lisa's threats grew darker, but they felt hollow in light of their exposed wrongdoing. I faced their aggression with a calm yet firm resolve, prepared to defend my livelihood against their vindictiveness. The tension in the kitchen thickened as Susan and Lisa's threats escalated into a chaotic chase. I dodged them deftly, fear mixing with determination. The moment I flung the door open, a wave of relief washed over me as I saw Andrew standing there, unaware of the commotion that had unfolded just moments before. "Help me, your mom and sister are out of control," I exclaimed, desperate for his intervention. Andrew, taken aback, could only ask what was happening as Susan quickly twisted the narrative, accusing me of being the aggressor. She falsely claimed that I had threatened them with violence and vandalism. Andrew looked torn, stuttering as he tried to find the right words. My heart sank, but I urged him to stand by me, to defend the truth against the lies his family was spreading. He remained silent, and that silence spoke volumes about his inner conflict. Susan seized the opportunity to remind him of his loyalty to them, suggesting that his allegiance would always lie with his family, not with me. Andrew tried to mediate, claiming he loved us both equally, but his indecision only deepened the rift between us. I reminded him of the irrefutable evidence he had shown me. "Look at the truth, Andrew," I said, pushing him to acknowledge the reality of what had been happening. Finally, Andrew spoke up, admitting the vandalism and harassment I had faced were unjust. But even as he pleaded for a resolution, his words seemed insufficient, as if he couldn't fully commit to standing by me. Just then, Uncle Jacob entered, blissfully unaware of the tension in the room, eager to join the celebration. He brushed past the charged atmosphere, but Susan and Lisa weren't done yet. They continued their threats, warning Andrew of dire consequences if I took legal action. Their manipulation didn't stop there. They questioned Andrew's autonomy, suggesting he would side with them out of obligation rather than reason. Andrew's silence only fueled their narrative, casting doubt on his support for me. The situation reached a breaking point, and I stormed off to join the larger family gathering at the grand dining table. Despite the turmoil within me, I forced myself to sit with an air of calm, determined not to show my anger. Andrew and Lisa followed, and though Andrew shot me glances full of unspoken words, my fury kept us silent. When Susan and Uncle Jacob arrived, the awkwardness of the moment was palpable. The meal began, but my anger simmered beneath the surface, threatening to boil over. Finally, I could take no more. In a quiet moment, I stood up, commanding the attention of everyone present. "I have something crucial to share," I announced, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. I didn't name them directly, but let the recorded argument play, exposing Lisa and Susan's malevolence for all to hear. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room as their scheme was laid bare. Lisa and Susan sat frozen, their deceit fully revealed, yet they still tried to discredit me, accusing me of fabricating the entire ordeal for attention. The dinner devolved into chaos, with accusations flying back and forth. The family scrambled to comprehend the full extent of the betrayal. Andrew remained silent, his words lost amidst the uproar, until the sound of approaching sirens cut through the noise. In a fit of rage, Susan accused me of orchestrating their downfall. I didn't do anything, I protested, still unaware of the police's imminent arrival. Then, Andrew spoke up. I did it, he admitted, confessing that he had called the authorities. His declaration shifted the atmosphere, acknowledging the wrongs done to me and pledging his support. This is about right and wrong, Andrew said, his voice firm. Mom, Lisa, it's time to face the consequences of your actions. As the police arrived, reality set in. Andrew's intervention wasn't just an act of support, it was a crucial step toward restoring justice within the family. His words marked a moment of reckoning, underscoring the importance of standing up for what's right, even when it means confronting those closest to us. The police went straight to Susan, who was making a scene, shouting as they took her away. Lisa tried to flee, but was quickly apprehended. Both of them were clearly embarrassed as they were escorted out, throwing angry glances my way and calling me names. As they passed by Andrew, they called him a traitor. Once they were gone, the mood lightened considerably. We started talking about how difficult it had been to deal with Susan and Lisa, and Uncle Jacob even joked he'd rather be in jail than spend another minute with them. The rest of the family reunion went on to become one of the best we'd ever had, all thanks to their absence. Later that night, our phones started ringing with calls from the jail. It was Susan and Lisa, trying to reach out to family members. Some of us talked to them, suggesting they needed time behind bars to reflect on their actions. Others pretended the call was breaking up, and most of us ignored them altogether. Andrew's decision to call the police brought us closer, and it marked a turning point in our relationship. Susan and Lisa eventually got out of jail, but had to pay for the damage they caused. I could only imagine how that stung their pride. Now, whenever we run into each other, the smug expressions they once wore have been replaced with embarrassment and worry. Getting back at them for everything they did was incredibly satisfying. Life in the urban sprawl as a police officer doesn't just toughen you, it encases you in a shell of skepticism so impenetrable it might as well be Kevlar. That was me, Emma, a 37-year-old former lieutenant turned private detective, lugging around a suitcase of mistrust heavier than the cases I cracked. My daily grind revolved around unfaithful partners and the art of deception, not exactly the setting for a romantic fairy tale. Then Bobby walked into my life, a beacon of modern art in a world full of cynicism, refreshing my reality like a vibrant brushstroke on a fading mural. We met at an art exhibition in Philadelphia, a venue teeming with enthusiasts throwing around terms like postmodern and avant-garde with effortless poise. Feeling out of place, I wandered the gallery like a fish trying to pedal a bicycle. Intriguing piece, isn't it? Bobby's voice cut through my discomfort, his gaze fixed on what appeared to be a strategically arranged heap of junk. If by intriguing, you mean I've seen tidier trash heaps, then absolutely, it's fascinating, I quipped. His laugh was deep and warm, turning a few heads. He introduced himself, and from that moment, my life took on a new hue. Fast forward 7 months, and I was utterly smitten, caught up in a whirlwind romance that felt surreal. Bobby, with his dapper style and old-world charm, swept me off my feet with poetry readings, art shows, and the kind of attention that made me feel like the only woman alive. Under a starlit sky in Central Park, he proposed, and without hesitation, I said yes, my heart pounding with sheer joy. But every fairy tale has its shadows. Enter Marilyn, Bobby's mother, the epitome of frostiness. Our first dinner together was tense, with Marilyn scrutinizing me as if I were an unworthy intruder in her carefully curated world. A detective? Isn't that a bit unladylike? She asked, her tone sharp. Depends on the century your expectations are anchored in, I replied without missing a beat, earning a tense smile from Bobby. Marilyn's visits became frequent audits of my life. 3 weeks into our marriage, she appeared unannounced. Emma, darling, she began, her voice dripping with condescension, still clinging to that quaint little job of yours? I had hoped marriage would refine you. Slicing vegetables for dinner, I gripped the knife a little tighter. Marilyn, where I come from, we call this earning a living. Maybe you should try it sometime instead of leeching off others. I shot back, keeping my voice steady. Her lips pursed tightly. Bobby was raised with certain expectations. Emma, there's still time for you to find a more suitable career. Like being a full-time meddler? I retorted. Thanks. but I'll stick to tracking down cheaters and liars. Speaking of which, how's your bridge club treating you? Bobby walked in just then, his timing impeccable as always. What's going on? He asked, looking between us. Your wife was clarifying her career choices for me, Marilyn said, her tone overly sweet. Bobby sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Mom, Emma's career is important to her. It's part of who she is. Turning to me, he pleaded, Emma, let's not do this now, please. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but I held back. Fine, I said curtly, returning to the vegetables. After Marilyn's visits, Bobby would retreat into a frustrating silence. It became painfully clear whose side he was on, and it wasn't mine. One evening, after Marilyn criticized everything from my cooking to my housekeeping, I confronted him. Why don't you ever stand up for me? Your mother treats me like I'm invisible, and you just let her. Is this what our marriage is supposed to be? He looked weary. Emma, she's old-fashioned. What do you want me to do? Cut her off? No, I replied, exasperated. I want you to support me, to tell her she can't bulldoze over us. Is that asking too much? I'll talk to her, okay? Just give it time. She'll adjust, he said, raking his fingers through his hair. But she didn't adjust, neither did he. The gap between us grew, fueled by Marilyn's coldness and Bobby's passivity, forming a rift too vast to bridge. Living with Bobby began to feel like starring in a melodrama where the cracks in the perfect facade only widened. His job at a prestigious art gallery sounded impressive, but his earnings were erratic at best. Meanwhile, I was left wondering if this was the love story I had signed up for, or a cautionary tale in disguise. I was doing well, securing a comfortable lifestyle for us in a stylish apartment in a desirable neighborhood. One evening, over dinner, I decided to bring up the future. I'd been thinking, I started, setting my fork down. Eventually, it'd be nice to buy a house, you know, something with enough space if we decide to start a family. Bobby paused, his fork midair, looking at me like I'd just suggested moving to Mars. Emma, where are you getting these ideas? We don't need a house, and me finding a new job? That's not even on the radar. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my tone even. It's not about needing it, Bobby, it's about planning, stability, thinking ahead. He chuckled, the sound once warm but now grating on my nerves. You and your fixation on money, always crunching the numbers. Money isn't everything, Emma. That laugh, that dismissive laugh, pushed me to the edge. Easy for you to say when you're not the one stressed about paying the bills each month. I shot back, my voice tight. He shrugged, as though brushing away my words. I'm happy with our life as it is. You're the one who's never satisfied. The fork in my hand felt heavier than it should as I placed it on my plate. Maybe I wouldn't be so focused on money if you contributed more than critiques about how I manage it. He didn't even glance up, just kept eating. I contribute in other ways, Emma, not everything is about money. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thoughts racing. It wasn't just about the house, or kids, or finances. It was about respect, partnership, and support, none of which Bobby seemed to value. As long as his life was comfortable, my concerns were dismissed as some misguided obsession with money. On a seemingly ordinary Sunday, the tension in our apartment reached a new peak when Marilyn, my ever-charming mother-in-law, made one of her unannounced visits. The living room became a stage for unexpected drama as I watched her pacing, phone pressed to her ear, her voice wavering between panic and disbelief. You're telling me my social security number has been suspended? She exclaimed, fumbling through her purse for her checkbook. How much do I need to pay to fix this? From the kitchen, coffee in hand, I overheard the words Social Security and payment, and every instinct honed from years of police work screamed scam. Setting the mug down, I walked briskly into the living room. Marilyn, hang up, it's a scam, I said firmly but calmly, trying to convey urgency without escalating her panic. She turned to me, eyes wide and face flushed. I beg your pardon? I'm handling this, Emma, there's no need for your intrusion. I could see she was shaken but too proud to admit it. Before she could press further, I leaned in and said more firmly, Marilyn, trust me, I've dealt with hundreds of these cases. They're trying to steal from you. Her lips pursed tightly, but she hesitated, phone still in her hand. I reached out gently, hang up, and we'll call the real Social Security office together. You'll see. Reluctantly, she ended the call. The tension in the room hung thick as Bobby finally stepped in, his expression torn between annoyance and concern. Mom, you should have listened to Emma from the start, he said, placing a hand on her shoulder. But instead of gratitude, Marilyn's glare shifted to me. It's always so convenient for her to play the hero, isn't it? And just like that, the gratitude I'd hoped for evaporated. I clenched my jaw, swallowing the retort on the tip of my tongue, knowing this was a fight that wouldn't be worth winning. I stepped forward, grabbed the phone, and ended the call with a sharp click. The room fell into tense silence. Marilyn recoiled, her face a storm of fury and disbelief. "How dare you?" she exclaimed, her voice trembling. "That was incredibly rude and uncalled for. Who do you think you are, treating me like some naive child?" Before I could respond, Bobby appeared in the doorway, his expression a mix of concern and frustration. "Emma, what's going on? Why are you upsetting my mother?" I turned to him, frustration bubbling over. That call was from scammers, Bobby. They were trying to con Marilyn out of her money, claiming her social security number was suspended. "It's a common scam, I've seen it countless times." Bobby rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture I knew well. It meant he felt caught in the middle. "Okay, but couldn't you have handled it more diplomatically?" Marilyn, her hands trembling as she gathered her belongings, shot me a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "I don't need saving, especially not from someone who treats me so disrespectfully. I'll speak with the bank and see what they say about this so-called scam." She stormed out, leaving a frosty silence in her wake. Bobby sighed, his eyes shifting between the door and me. "Emma, I know you meant well, but you have to handle things more gently, especially with my mother." I felt a pang of guilt but held my ground. "Bobby, I know it seemed harsh, but scammers thrive on urgency. There wasn't time for polite exchanges. Any hesitation could have cost her thousands." The next day, still wrestling with a mix of guilt and curiosity, I called Marilyn. After 3 rings, she answered, her tone cold and measured. "What do you want, Emma?" I cleared my throat. "I just wanted to check on you after yesterday. Did you speak with the bank about the call?" There was a long pause before she replied, her voice reluctant. "Yes, I did. They confirmed it was a scam." Relief washed over me, but her tone quickly hardened. "That doesn't excuse how you handled things. You were rude and aggressive." Pinching the bridge of my nose, I felt a headache building. "I'm sorry if I came across as harsh. I was trying to protect you. These scammers are professionals, they're convincing, and they rely on people hesitating." Her response was curt, though tinged with begrudging acknowledgement. "Well, I suppose I should thank you for stopping me from making a mistake, but don't think this changes my opinion of your methods, or your demeanor. Goodbye, Emma." I saw Bobby's upcoming birthday as a chance to bridge the growing chasm between us, a hopeful opportunity to rekindle the fading spark in our relationship. Carefully, I planned a romantic weekend getaway, envisioning it as a step toward restoring what we once had. But fate, or Marilyn, had other plans. She bulldozed my efforts with her own agenda, scheduling a grand dinner at her mansion on a weekday, fully aware of my packed work schedule. Over the phone, I pleaded, "Can't we move it to Saturday? I'm drowning at work." Her voice was a blend of saccharine sweetness and icy control. "No, dear, this is when it's happening. Bobby shouldn't have to adjust his birthday to fit around your job." Frustration gnawed at me, and I found myself confiding in my boss, the only person who seemed to understand. He'd witnessed more betrayals than most and recognized the importance of the moment. "Go," he urged with a knowing look. "Do what you need to do." When I arrived at Marilyn's, the party was already in full swing, a spectacle of ostentation and pretense. Marilyn spotted me immediately, her smile tightening as she whispered something to Bobby. My eyes followed her line of sight, and there he was, my husband, sitting by the fireplace, his arm draped casually around a woman who was far more than just a colleague. My heart sank, but I steeled myself and approached. "Aren't you going to introduce me?" I asked, trying to sound composed despite the whirlwind of emotions inside. Bobby flinched, his eyes widening in surprise. "Ah, Emma, this is Lori from the gallery," he mumbled, turning awkwardly to the woman. "And this is, Emma, a relative." The word struck like a slap. "A relative? Seriously, Bobby?" I couldn't contain my incredulity. "Your wife, Bobby, remember?" My voice carried across the room, silencing the hum of conversations. All eyes turned to us. Bobby's face turned red with a mix of embarrassment and irritation. "You know, a real wife would have made her husband's birthday a priority," he shot back, dismissing me with a turn of his shoulder. Before I could respond, Marilyn appeared, her voice oozing disdain. "You see, Emma, you just don't fit in here. Bobby needs someone supportive, like Lori, not, whatever this is." Her words, sharp and deliberate, cut deep. She gestured toward the door with a venomous smile. I think it's best if you leave. You're not wanted here. I took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of dignity I had left. You know what, Marilyn? Maybe you're right. Maybe I don't belong in a family that thrives on lies and deception. Without another word, I turned and walked out into the cold night, the chill wrapping around me like the icy aftermath of betrayal. After the disaster at Bobby's birthday and the stark revelations that followed, I knew I needed irrefutable proof to end the marriage on my terms. The thought of investigating Bobby myself felt unbearable. I could handle uncovering secrets about strangers, but not about the man I had once envisioned growing old with. So, I called Alan, a trusted colleague with a knack for uncovering discreet affairs. Hey, Alan, I need a favor, I said, steadying my voice over the phone. Anything for you, what's up? He responded, his loyalty a small comfort in the storm of betrayal. It's Bobby, I admitted, the words tasting bitter. I'm sure he's seeing someone. I need evidence. I admitted the truth, my words carrying a mix of relief and dread. Say no more, Alan said confidently. I'll handle it discreetly. You'll have everything you need soon. His assurance eased some of my anxiety. True to his word, Alan delivered everything: photos, audio clips, and undeniable proof. Lori wasn't just a colleague, she was in the country illegally, seeking a quick marriage to fix her immigration status while involved in fraud. Part of me wanted to confront Bobby, to throw the evidence in his face and watch him squirm, but then I remembered his condescension, his smug expression, and his blatant dismissal of me. No, he didn't deserve my concern or my help. Filing for divorce was like tearing off a band-aid from a wound that had been festering for far too long. I demanded financial compensation, the bare minimum after his betrayal. The fallout was explosive. Marilyn, ever the dragon lady, stood firmly by Bobby's side, painting me as the villain, but I stood my ground, fueled by both the evidence and the injustice of their accusations. When the ink on the divorce papers dried, it wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was the beginning of a new chapter, a rebirth from the ashes of my life with Bobby. Opening my detective agency wasn't just a dream fulfilled, it was a testament to my resilience. The agency quickly built a reputation for discretion and effectiveness, a reflection of the lessons I had learned through my own struggles. One morning, sunlight streamed into my new office, illuminating the framed license on the wall. Alice, my right-hand woman and confidant, peeked in. Boss lady, you've got a minute? We've got a potentially big case. A woman suspects her husband of having an affair. She wants surveillance, photos, the works. I couldn't help but smile at the irony. Sounds like our bread and butter. Do we have the details? Alice nodded, placing a file on my desk. Yeah, but there's a catch. She's on a tight budget. I thought for a moment, realizing this was my chance to pay it forward. Tell her we'll work with her budget. And Alice? Let's make sure we're thorough. I know all too well what it's like to be on the other side of this conversation. Alice grinned. Knew you'd say that. You're a good person, you know. I smirked. Try telling that to my ex. As the days passed and the cases piled up, each one felt like a step toward healing. Infidelity, secrets, and lies, these were the patterns I had grown familiar with. Yet, with each closed case, I felt another piece of myself mend. Validation that I had made the right choice to start over. Then one morning, as the city stirred awake, an elderly woman burst into the office, her distress palpable. She argued with my receptionist about her son's wife, who had vanished with a large sum of money, leaving the family in financial ruins. She insisted on speaking to the agency owner and mentioned needing a payment plan. Curiosity piqued. I decided to meet her myself. To my astonishment, I found myself face to face with Marilyn, my former mother-in-law. Recognition flickered across her face before embarrassment set in. Emma, you run this agency? I do, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the swirl of emotions. How can I help? Desperation overtook her shame. You have to help me find her. The woman who ran off with my son's money. Bobby's in shambles. Do it for the family's sake, without charge. Her audacity rendered me momentarily speechless. Marilyn, first, we're not family. Second, I run a business, not a charity for ex-in-laws. Emma, after everything, can't you do this one thing? It's the least you could do, she pressed. I laughed bitterly. The least I could do? Marilyn, after your son cheated on me, you expect me to just forgive and forget? Go to the police. They're better equipped for this. She stood there, flabbergasted, as if the thought of me refusing her had never crossed her mind. Marilyn, I've learned my lesson, never trust scammers and liars. Maybe it's time you did too. The decision was final. Life, it seemed, had come full circle, but I had no intention of being dragged back into their chaos. A week later, my phone buzzed. The caller ID showed a number I thought I had erased, Bobby. Against my better judgment, I answered. Bobby, what do you want? Emma, he began, his tone tentative. I've been thinking, I want us to start over, for the kids, you know. I couldn't help but snort. Really? And where would we live in this fantasy of yours? With my mom, at first, he said eagerly. We can save money, then you can buy us a house, it'll be perfect. I laughed, the absurdity of his proposal striking me fully. You think I'd come back to play house with you and your mom, and then foot the bill for a big house? Emma, I've changed, please, he pleaded. Bobby, I said firmly, you haven't changed a bit, goodbye. As I hung up, a profound sense of peace washed over me. The call, absurd as it was, served as validation. I had grown, I had healed, and I had reclaimed my life. The future lay ahead, bright and brimming with promise. Turning back to my work, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. After all, the best revenge is living well, and I was doing just that.
Hello everyone, I'm Betty, and I'd like to share a significant chapter of my life, one that involves challenges with my in-laws and my husband while navigating a difficult divorce. I hope my story resonates with anyone who's faced unfair criticism from their in-laws. Let me take you back to where it all began. I met Kevin, my now estranged husband, on a dating app when I was a 20-year-old college student. Kevin was 26, established, and financially stable. Despite our age difference, we fell in love quickly. I've always believed that love isn't confined by age or appearance, so Kevin's being older was never an issue for me. However, Kevin struggled with our age gap. He often asked, "Why are you with me, Betty? You could find someone your age, someone who might be a better match," but I chose him because I loved him, and to me, age was just a number. Kevin's insecurities ran deep, and he would press, "There must be another reason. It's not normal for someone like you to be with someone like me. Please, just tell me the real reason." I reassured him again and again that my feelings were genuine, that I wasn't interested in dating someone my age. I loved him for who he was, and that was what mattered to me. Yet, his self-doubt remained, hinting at deeper issues of self-esteem that seemed to have kept him single before we met. Wanting to prove my love, I made sure Kevin never spent excessively on me. As a college student, I wasn't wealthy, but I bought him thoughtful gifts and managed my own finances. I worked part-time jobs, ensuring I wasn't financially dependent on him. Kevin seemed to appreciate these efforts, but sadly, his insecurities didn't fade. He continued to question the sincerity of my love, which hurt deeply. It took 3 years before I truly understood where Kevin's issues were coming from. When I met his parents, Samuel and Charlotte, I began to see the root of his struggles. Samuel, Kevin's father, had experienced a sudden windfall when he won the lottery, which changed their lives overnight. This newfound wealth gave me insight into the environment that shaped Kevin's views and insecurities. After winning the lottery, Samuel and Charlotte bought a lavish house and invested wisely. However, their wealth came with a sense of superiority. During our first meeting, Samuel boasted, "Not everyone makes it big like I did. I worked hard, and look where it got me. Do you know how rare it is to win the lottery? I did it on my first try." They were proud of their financial success, often implying that Kevin, despite his college education, would never reach their level. Charlotte often hinted that Kevin's previous partners had only been after his money, leaving him once they were financially secure. They openly doubted his ability to make good decisions, which infuriated me. It was clear that Kevin's parents painted every woman he dated as a gold digger, and over time, Kevin started to believe this narrative. The insinuation that I, too, was just after his money became an embarrassing and hurtful part of their story. Fed up with their baseless assumptions, I finally stood up for both Kevin and myself. "I'm sorry, but I have to disagree," I said. "Kevin has worked hard to build his career, and in time, he will achieve even greater success, but that doesn't mean women are after his money." Samuel retorted, "That doesn't change the fact that women only want him for money. We worked hard for what we have, but Kevin does co-own the house. Eventually, it will be his. Every time these girls see our $350,000 house, I swear, they just see dollar signs. I couldn't hold back any longer. I can't speak for Kevin's past relationships, but I'm certainly not in this for the money. I love your son, and that's why we're together. I have no interest in your house. Charlotte then said, "Don't worry, Betty. Sometimes it's hard to accept that people can be successful and live in nice houses. You live in a small rented apartment with roommates. You might start desiring it after spending time around our house." Their comments pushed me to my limits. I was on the verge of losing my temper, but Kevin, who had been listening, said nothing. He didn't defend me or himself. Instead, he changed the subject. On our way home, I was taken aback by his indifferent attitude after such a tense visit with his parents. I knew I had to address the issue directly with Kevin. "Kevin, your parents are being unfair and hurtful to both of us. Why didn't you stand up for me?" Kevin sighed, his frustration clear. "What did you expect me to say, Betty? My past isn't exactly encouraging. I've been used before by people who only saw my parents' wealth, making plans for when they'd inherit the house. Even if they were wrong about those women, that doesn't mean they're wrong about everything. I felt a pang of hurt. Even if those women were after your money, that doesn't mean I am. It hurts that you stayed silent while your family insulted me." Kevin looked conflicted. "You know my family's wealthy now, and maybe they have a point. I'm not accusing you of having bad intentions, but I can see why it might look questionable to others. You don't have parents, and because of that, you might seem more reliant on my inheritance." His words were almost too much to bear. "What you're suggesting is absurd. Kevin, I've never pressured you to spend on me. Not having an inheritance doesn't make me a gold digger." Kevin remained stubborn, unwilling to see my side. "I love you, and that's what matters. Let's not argue about this anymore," he said, dismissing the conversation. While some might have found comfort in his declaration of love, I couldn't shake the feeling that he still doubted my intentions. I tried to discuss it again, even suggesting therapy to help him see things more clearly, but he refused, insisting there was nothing wrong. As time went on, I began distancing myself from his family. We got engaged right after I graduated from college, and I landed a decent job, which allowed me to start saving for our wedding. We shared the wedding expenses equally and married when I was 23. However, the next 4 years of our marriage were rocky. Kevin frequently visited his parents, returning each time more distant and upset. I knew Samuel and Charlotte were still poisoning his mind, continuing to brand me as a gold digger. Despite my pleas for him to reduce contact with them, Kevin kept seeing his parents often. Their negative influence started to deeply affect his view of our relationship, making him believe no one could love him for who he was.
Even after years of my unwavering love, Kevin's suspicions towards me never seemed to ease. The constant need to prove my sincerity grew more exhausting. But the moment that truly tested us came on Kevin's birthday. Wanting a low-key celebration, we decided to have a small cake party at home. Excited to make his day special, I surprised him with the expensive watch he'd admired for so long. Kevin was thrilled with the gift, but my heart sank when he suggested we show it off to his parents. Despite my hesitation, I agreed. When we arrived at his parents' house, Kevin couldn't wait to show off the new watch. "Mom, Dad, look at this beautiful watch Betty got me. I've wanted it for so long. Isn't it stunning?" His enthusiasm was palpable. Charlotte responded with a hint of surprise. "Oh, Kevin, it seems she does love you after all. We were quite worried for some time." But Samuel quickly added, "Don't be fooled, old Charlotte. She's a gold digger. She married our son because we have a $350,000 house. Let's not ignore the facts." I couldn't hold back my frustration. "Excuse me, why do you think I married your son for your house? I had been working and living in an apartment for years. Besides, if age was really a concern, why would I marry someone older unless I truly loved him?" I said, trying to hold my ground. "I assure you, I didn't marry Kevin for his money or for your house. I married him because I love him. Surely Kevin can confirm that, right?" To my shock, Kevin remained silent. His unwillingness to defend me in front of his accusing parents was unsettling, and I felt my heart sink. I looked at him, hoping for some reassurance, but he avoided my gaze. The silence between us grew heavy, his lack of response amplifying the harsh assumptions of his family. The more they criticized me, the more isolated I felt. Pushed to my limit, I finally confronted him. "Kevin, why aren't you saying anything? Your parents have always labeled me a gold digger. How will they ever see the real me if you don't speak up? Why are you so quiet? Tell them they're wrong." Kevin hesitated, his discomfort clear. He muttered, I don't know what you want me to say, Betty. Maybe my parents aren't completely wrong. There might be a possibility." His words trailed off, but the implication was unmistakable. The doubt in his voice, the hesitation to stand by me, was more than just a misunderstanding. It was a crack in the foundation of our relationship, a crack that threatened to cast a shadow over everything. My love for him, my place in his life, suddenly felt uncertain. The atmosphere at Kevin's birthday celebration, which had been intended to be special, quickly turned sour. I couldn't believe the accusations that were flying my way. "Are you serious right now, Kevin? You believe I married you for your assets?" His parents chimed in, their suspicion thick in the air. "Oddly, you've never talked about buying a house, have you? For someone renting, owning a home should be a priority. Our place is out of your price range. You could never afford something like this on your own. So marrying Kevin and settling here seems more logical." Kevin looked at me, his face a mixture of doubt and confusion. "Yeah, Betty, why would you marry me? You might have feelings for me, but I think there's more to it than just love." I was left speechless by their words. All the love and affection I had once felt for Kevin seemed to vanish in an instant. It wasn't just his parents' skepticism that hurt, it was Kevin's agreement with them that cut the deepest. In that moment, I knew I had to end our marriage, but I didn't reveal my decision right away. Instead, I waited for the right moment. Once Kevin and I were back home, I contacted a lawyer and began the divorce process. The lawyer reassured me that everything would be finalized within the week. In the meantime, I moved into a separate room to give myself some space. Kevin thought I was just cooling off. He had no idea what my intentions really were. When the divorce papers were ready, I packed my things and left. Kevin, clearly distressed, called me in a panic. I told him to meet me at a specific address and to bring his parents. He was confused, but he agreed. When they arrived, I was standing on the porch of a stunning house. Their expressions shifted as they took in the luxurious surroundings. "You must be wondering why I brought you here," I said, gesturing to the grand estate. "It's a beautiful house, isn't it? No one can compare their home to this one. It's worth around $3 million in today's market, quite expensive, right?" The dramatic setting was my way of showing them that their accusations were unfounded. I wasn't the person they thought I was, and I needed to make that clear, loudly and undeniably. "But it's worth every penny," I added, pointing to the lavish interior. "The furniture alone was worth millions." "What is this place, Betty?" Kevin asked, his confusion evident. "I don't understand why you have access to such a house." "Why don't you all come inside so we can talk properly?" I suggested, brushing off their astonishment. "I can't explain everything standing here on the porch." They followed me inside, their eyes widening at the opulent decor that greeted us. The owners had spared no expense in furnishing their home. As we settled into plush sofas, I took a deep breath, ready to address the elephant in the room. "I've made a decision," I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. "That's why we're here. I filed for divorce." I handed Kevin the papers. "We can proceed with an uncontested divorce if you agree." Kevin looked at me, his voice filled with confusion and concern. "What? I don't understand. Why are you filing for divorce?" "It's simple," I replied, my tone firm. "You and your parents think I'm a gold digger. You believe I married you for your house and your money. Despite everything I've said, you've refused to listen, so it's better for everyone if I leave, sparing you from what you deem my gold-digging tendencies." Kevin's disbelief was palpable. "You're considering divorce just because my parents spoke what they believed to be the truth? That's ridiculous." "I think it's for the best," I said, resolute. Kevin's mother, watching the exchange with an unreadable expression, finally chimed in. "If she's so adamant, you should just sign the papers, Kevin. At least then you can find someone who truly loves you." Kevin turned to me. "Why did you bring us to this house, Betty? Do you expect me to buy this for you as part of our divorce settlement?" I looked at him calmly. "Why would I need you to buy this house, Kevin? This house is already mine." Their jaws dropped in shock. "What? How can you afford a house like this? You're renting, and your job isn't enough to cover something like this. Stop lying to us," Kevin's father demanded, his voice sharp with suspicion. I could see their disbelief, but I was ready to prove something far bigger than my financial independence. This revelation wasn't just about money, it was about declaring my autonomy. I had done it on my own, and I would never allow their doubts to define me again. "This house is mine," I repeated firmly, And this is how I'm changing everything between us. Our relationship dynamics are forever altered. I'm not lying, I asserted, my voice steady as I saw the disbelief in their eyes. Kevin, remember when I told you my parents left me an inheritance? This house is part of it. It's in a trust for now, but I'll officially inherit it when I turn 31. I don't need a high-paying job, because I have a trust fund waiting for me. That's impossible, Kevin interrupted, his face etched with confusion. Your parents passed away years ago. They should have given you the house by now. I took a deep breath. My parents knew there were people who might try to take advantage of me. I explained. They put everything in a trust to protect it until I was old enough to understand what it meant. They wanted me to be settled with someone who genuinely cared about me, not someone who was after my money. Kevin's mother looked taken aback. Oh my God, Betty, you should have told us about this. We had no idea. This is a beautiful house. We could all live here very comfortably. Yeah, you should have shared that earlier, Kevin added, now looking relieved, though still somewhat embarrassed. We thought you were after our house. If we'd known. I always knew Betty was perfect for Kevin, his father chimed in, his tone shifting as he eyed the lavish surroundings. Look at this, she's a great match for him, look at her wealth. I couldn't help but laugh at the sudden shift in their attitude. It was dizzying how quickly their views of me had changed, but what struck me even more was how easily they'd forgotten about the divorce papers I had brought. Anyway, I said, pulling the divorce papers from my bag, here's my signature for an uncontested divorce. You can sign these if you agree. If not, we can take it to court, but I won't live with you anymore. Kevin looked at me, his eyes desperate. Wait, Betty, listen, there's no need to rush. You've proven you're not a gold digger. There's no reason to get a divorce now. We apologize for the misunderstanding. Doesn't that make things better? Kevin's parents nodded in agreement, but their words only fueled my frustration. I don't want your insincere apologies, I said, my voice firm. For 3 years, you allowed your family to label me a gold digger. You could have defended me, but you sided with them. You even accused me of it. I can't stay with someone who doesn't respect his wife. I'm done. They pleaded with me, asking me to overlook the past, but their lack of genuine remorse made it clear that nothing had truly changed. When I reached my breaking point, I demanded they leave, threatening to call the police if they didn't. My firm stance left them no choice but to leave. In the weeks that followed, Kevin and his parents relentlessly harassed me. They begged, pleaded, and even offered bribes, thinking money could sway my decision. It only fueled my anger, revealing their continued view of me as someone driven by financial gain. Ironically, since Kevin co-owned the house with his parents, I was entitled to half of his share, which only added to their desperation for reconciliation. Despite their relentless attempts, I stayed firm in my resolve to end things. I moved all my belongings to my parents' house, asserting my right to stay there, even before officially inheriting the property. Kevin and his family kept trying to reach me, but I changed my number to cut them off. Kevin even showed up at my workplace, but I had already informed security, and they asked him to leave. He still hadn't signed the divorce papers, holding on to hope that I would change my mind. Almost a year had passed, and the situation remained unresolved, a testament to the complexity and emotional weight of our lives entangled together. But I had made it this far on my own. I was financially stable, and though I had gone on a few dates, I wasn't ready for anything serious yet. A cousin of Kevin's told me his family was now scrambling to pay me my rightful share of the house. Their legal fees were mounting, and their savings were running low. Kevin had even suggested selling the house, harboring resentment toward his parents for the chaos they'd caused in his life. At this point, I couldn't care less about their dilemmas. My only focus was to be free from their toxic influence and move on with my life, leaving behind the chaos and negativity that had plagued me for so long.
My name is Sarah, and these days, I collaborate with my husband John at his family-run company. The enterprise, led by my father-in-law, Richard, is a small but inviting establishment employing about 6 individuals. Richard, a man of few words, seldom involves himself in the day-to-day operations of the company. Instead, John, poised to become the next president, works tirelessly, actively pursuing clients and securing new projects, demonstrating his dedication to the company's expansion. During significant projects, all the employees come together, creating a vibrant and enthusiastic atmosphere. I've been part of this spirited environment for the past 10 years, ever since I got married. However, my mother-in-law, Nancy, seems to harbor some discontent about my role. As I returned home early to prepare dinner while John remained at the office, Nancy, who had been part of the family business until our marriage, confronted me with disapproving words. "How long do you plan on clinging to our family business?" Nancy asked, her words laden with criticism. Nancy, who had looked forward to relaxation post-retirement, appeared to redirect her energy into scrutinizing my choices. In response, I tried to maintain composure, asking, "What do you mean by clinging?" Nancy retorted with a cutting tone, suggesting that I must have married John out of necessity and was now taking advantage of working in their company. Sighing inwardly, I realized that such accusations from her had become more frequent lately. When I got married, I willingly left my previous job to join John's family-run business. It was my decision, not a result of unemployment. However, Nancy seemed convinced of my incompetence at work. I attempted to explain, "Mom, it's not that I couldn't work elsewhere. I chose to join John's company." Her dismissive retort revealed her lack of understanding, as she believed she saw through my supposed hidden motives. The issues with my mother-in-law extended beyond words. Despite quitting her job with the promise of managing the household, she refused to contribute, leaving my father-in-law to repeatedly request her assistance with housework. Instead, she stubbornly insisted, "I've worked all my life. Now it's the daughter-in-law's turn to do the housework." Consequently, the responsibility often fell on me to prepare dinner, clean up after meals, and manage other household tasks. One sunny afternoon, mustering courage, I decided to address the domestic issue. "Nancy," I began hesitantly, "I've noticed the dishes often get left in the sink. It would be helpful if you could tidy up after your meals." My small request, however, triggered an angry response. She accused me of giving orders in her own house and questioned my right as a daughter-in-law to dictate her actions. Caught in this exhausting exchange, I realized that if I didn't start preparing dinner soon, we'd be eating much later than usual. Despite my internal frustrations, I managed to keep a composed exterior. "Mom, let's continue this conversation later," I suggested, attempting to diffuse the tension momentarily. Needing to focus on preparing dinner, as it seemed we would eat late tonight, Nancy finally retreated to the living room, leaving me alone with my thoughts amidst the clatter of cooking utensils. Both Richard and John were aware of Nancy's mistreatment towards me as their daughter-in-law, and they attempted to intervene whenever they witnessed it happening. However, their efforts seemed to have little effect. Each time they confronted the situation, their faces betrayed concern and frustration, a testament to their desire to foster harmony in our family dynamic. Ironically, whenever Richard and John scolded Nancy for her behavior, she redirected her anger towards me, becoming even more hostile and sharp with her words. Her usually kind and gentle demeanor twisted with disdain, her tone cutting deeper than before. Though I had never experienced physical violence, the emotional toll of Nancy's words was significant. Richard and John's support had been my solace, allowing me to somewhat overlook Nancy's harsh words. Until one unimaginable morning. Just after I had finished cleaning up from breakfast and was preparing to leave for work amidst the morning rush, Nancy exclaimed, "Oh my, what a mess they trash here!" And without warning, she doused my handbag with a bucket of water. I was stunned, a mixture of shock and anger rendering me speechless. "What are you doing, Nancy?" I managed to stutter out, my voice trembling with disbelief. Nancy's response was flippant, resembling that of a mischievous child. "Oh, was that your stuff? I thought it was just a big piece of trash." Her casual dismissal infuriated me. Even if you thought it was trash, who pours water on it? What kind of mindset is that? Now the carpet is all wet. What about the vacuum cleaner? My words were a jumble of anger and confusion as I frantically emptied the water-soaked contents of my bag, including documents I needed for work, onto the table. Nancy responded nonchalantly, her face calm, showing no signs of remorse or concern for my distress. "Because you don't need to go to work anymore." I was baffled. In our living room, bathed in morning light, I sat opposite Nancy, her expression colder and more resolute than usual. It was as if she had made a decision that would change everything. "Excuse me?" My response was laden with confusion and surprise. "You've been clinging to this house for 10 years, but finally I can get rid of you." Her words pierced my heart, her voice carrying a level of anger and determination I had never heard before. My mind reeled, and my heart filled with sorrow. "Getting rid of me?" I questioned, disbelief in my voice. Her words made me feel like an outsider in this family. "In fact, my daughter is joining the company, so we need you to leave. Today's your last day. Well, all you have to do today is bow your head to your father-in-law and John, apologizing for all the trouble you've caused." Her mocking laughter further wounded me. She was using my position at work to force me out. I had dedicated years to that job, building respect and memories. I was dumbfounded. My heart was filled with disbelief at her merciless decision. I had devoted myself to this family, but it seemed my sacrifices meant nothing to her. "Are you sure about this? Wasn't Jessica working in a clothing store in Manhattan?" My words reflected my confusion and apprehension. My job was more than just a source of income. It was my avenue for self-fulfillment. Meanwhile, Jessica, my sister-in-law, seemed to have grown tired of city life and had chosen to return to the family. She said she was tired of dealing with the cold people of Manhattan, so I told her as she came back home, "I have a job ready for her." She agreed to return immediately. "Now that she's coming back, I want you out of this house." Her words were difficult to comprehend. She was ready to upend my life with a single decision, completely disregarding my place in the family, without even listening to me. "I've written your resignation letter," she said, handing me an envelope. She effectively expelled me from the house. In that moment, my heart shattered completely. Everything I had built over the years was reduced to nothing, treated like a mere piece of paper. Her actions severed our family bond irreparably. I headed to the company, just a brisk 3-minute walk from my home, my mind a whirlwind of apprehension and anticipation. As I walked under the cool morning sky, each step felt heavy with the weight of what was to come. Upon reaching the office, I shared with my father-in-law Richard and my husband John. I relayed what my mother-in-law had said. Their faces were a mix of shock and thinly veiled anger, yet they remained composed. They suggested that maybe, just maybe, it was time for me to resign to show her the reality of the situation. This suggestion sent my heart into turmoil. Having worked tirelessly in our family-run business for years, I barely knew what a long vacation felt like, aside from brief respites during Thanksgiving and the holiday season. Encouraged by John and Richard's gentle words, "Why don't you spread your wings for a change?" I made up my mind to embark on a little trip. As I packed, I found myself pondering deeply about my life, my choices, and what lay ahead. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law Jessica, who had come to replace me at the company, shockingly didn't show up until 1:00 p.m. Her irresponsible attitude left John and Richard, who had been holding the fort in my absence, in a state of dismay. Jessica seemed utterly disinterested in understanding the work despite their attempts to explain it to her. Hearing about this, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of anxiety about the future of our company, even as I looked forward to my trip. Departing without encountering my mother-in-law, I swiftly set off. During the trip, as I enjoyed the view outside the train, I reflected on my life, the past, the present, and what was yet to come. Relishing the local seafood delicacies, I contemplated deeply about myself, my family, and our business. However, the tranquility of my 4th day was shattered when Jessica called me in tears. "What's going on? Mom said it was an easy job, just sitting in a chair, but John and Dad are acting like I can't do anything right." Her words, most likely given to her by my mother-in-law, took me by surprise. Even as I enjoyed my leisure, I realized it was time to address the situation. "So, Jessica, how proficient are you with computers?" Hesitantly, she replied, Well, I usually watch videos online and play games too. Her answer indicated her limited experience with technical aspects. Delving deeper, I asked about her familiarity with software tools such as Word or Excel, and her response was puzzled. Considering her background in the Manhattan apparel industry, it was unlikely that she never used a computer. Tasks such as tracking sales and managing inventory would have required her to use Excel. When asked if she could handle calculations for sales or fill in documents, she confidently answered, "I could handle that task." However, when probed further with, "Can you calculate tax too, right?" her confidence waned, and she responded uncertainly. This question was a test of her mathematical skills and her ability to apply them in a business context. While Jessica might possess other skills, it was apparent she felt insecure about the required skill set for the job. Her discomfort seemed particularly rooted in her struggle with calculations, which could be why she faced criticism from Richard and John. First and foremost, it was necessary to give my mother-in-law and her cohort, who tried to oust me, a taste of their own medicine. To begin with, since you're taking over my job, I expect you to handle the accounting tasks efficiently. Be mindful of email etiquette. A casual tone suitable for friends is utterly inappropriate for business communication. Also, you'll be responsible for scheduling the staff shifts. Though our team is small, everyone's requests for time off are carefully considered, so make sure not to prioritize your own convenience over theirs. As I continued to list down my demands, I could hear her sobbing on the other end of the line. But I was told I wouldn't have to do anything. Why are there so many tasks? I didn't come back home for this. She abruptly ended the call. In the following 3 days, I decided to enjoy sightseeing in Manhattan, where Jessica had fled. From my experience, I learned that not everyone in Manhattan is cold-hearted. In fact, it seemed rarer to find people as cold-hearted as my mother-in-law and Jessica, who had conspired to drive me away. A week after leaving my job, I returned to my in-laws' house. Upon my arrival, Nancy, with her face flushed red, confronted me with a burst of anger. "How dare you make my daughter cry? You won't get away with this," Nancy exclaimed furiously, her eyes brimming with anger and misunderstanding. She made a move to grab me, but John and Richard quickly intervened. They tried to calm her down, but her anger seemed far from subsiding. John sighed deeply before speaking. "Jessica is crying because she was scolded for trying to boss around her employees, despite her inability to do anything right. It's not Sarah's fault. Besides, Sarah hasn't been here for a week, so there's no way she could have upset Jessica. Mother, you really need to stop these baseless accusations." John's voice was calm yet carried weight, trying to convey the facts and clear the misunderstanding. "But it's because of her. This woman is the reason for Jessica's suffering," Nancy retorted, her voice emotional, directing her baseless suspicions towards me. Her words lacked any foundation of truth. "Where is Jessica, by the way?" I asked, looking around the living room. But Jessica was nowhere to be seen, adding more mystery to the already puzzling situation. It doesn't matter to me that Nancy is upset about Jessica, but Jessica has no place to go since she terminated her lease in her Manhattan apartment. I thought she would be at her parents' house, but her absence raised questions. I pondered. John explained. "Jessica's locked herself in her room. She's been crying and saying she doesn't want to go to work anymore." It seemed like Jessica had run away from learning the job well. It was understandable that she would find it challenging, considering she lacked the skills to fill in for me. "You've been poisoning John and Richard against me, haven't you? If not, they wouldn't say the company ran better with me than with the incompetent Jessica," Nancy accused me vehemently. Her words were filled with long-standing misunderstandings and prejudices, leaving me utterly perplexed. She seemed to have always viewed me as an adversary, her words reflecting years of misconceptions. John let out a heavy sigh, his face showing weariness and frustration with the tangled web of emotions in this family. He had tried repeatedly to resolve the misunderstandings among family members, but his efforts seemed far from fruitful. "Mom, He began, trying once again to bring clarity to the situation. I realize it might sound a bit unusual, but Sarah is truly exceptional at her work. She holds a certification in bookkeeping, and her secretarial skills are top-notch. Moreover, she has studied Spanish and even has experience studying abroad. When it comes to dealing with multiple languages at our company, Sarah is the one who handles everything, John explained with a sense of pride, and his mother Nancy looked utterly surprised. Nancy had assumed that I quit my job as soon as I joined the family, so she had no idea about my contributions and achievements at work. What? That sounds like something straight out of a TV drama. Actually, back in college, I was so focused on getting various certifications that I immersed myself in my studies to the point where I hardly participated in clubs or had time for a romantic relationship. It was during this phase of my life that I met John, who visited my company for business. I inadvertently found myself sharing the story of how John and I first met. However, I realized that this wasn't what Nancy wanted to hear, so I steered the conversation back to the original topic. In a nutshell, I was entrusted with a wide array of responsibilities at the company, from handling accounting tasks to schedule coordination, liaising with other companies, and managing employee shifts. There were numerous tasks under my purview. Thanks to that, I was able to focus on reaching out to other companies for business deals. The work environment became much more comfortable compared to the times when you were around. Mom, John added, leaving Nancy with her mouth agape in amazement. Just then, Richard, John's father, chimed in with a comment that took me by surprise. We're going to shut down that company soon. Actually, Jessica made a big blunder. Despite being asked to prepare some documents, she decided to handle phone calls because it seemed more fun doing so. While John and I were away, she ended up behaving rudely to the person in charge from Company A. Of course, I got a call to confirm this. Hearing this, I was so shocked that I instinctively covered my mouth with my hand. I can't believe Jessica would do something like that, I murmured. Filled with disbelief, the thought that Jessica's actions might lead to the downfall of our company flashed through my mind, filling me with dread. However, as I wallowed in these anxious thoughts, the story took an unexpected turn. When I explained the situation, they suggested it might be time to end the family business. We had mentioned this before, right? About being absorbed by another company. The president of Company A stepped forward, saying he was interested. This was an unexpected yet long-hoped-for development. With a family-run business, there are limitations, and it's uncertain whether we could consistently acquire a stable customer base. That's why John had always been working hard in sales, trying to secure new clients. Being absorbed by a larger company could mean securing a steady customer base. The once uncertain future suddenly seemed to hold a glimmer of hope. However, this news brought relief only to me, John, and his father. John's mother suddenly opposed the idea, saying, "That's not acceptable. John must become the president. This company is ours, isn't it?" I was taken aback by the sudden change in the situation. It seemed that more than a stable future, Nancy was concerned about maintaining the status of being part of a company president's family, part of an executive family. And you're telling me he's not going to be the president anymore? Absolutely not acceptable, exclaimed Nancy passionately. This commotion piqued the interest of Jessica, who was upstairs in her room, leaving her to come down to the living room to see what was happening. In response to the chaos started by Nancy, Richard spoke up with a calm but final statement. "I am divorcing you, so either way, you will no longer be part of this executive family. Not only have you not changed your attitude towards my wife, but you also neglect household chores. To top it off, you spend your days out with young men instead of being home. I have no intention of supporting such a wife any longer." This was news to both me and John. We were so shocked that we could only stare at Sarah's father-in-law with wide eyes. It seemed he had planned to discuss divorce from the beginning, as he took out divorce papers and a photo of Nancy with a young man from the living room shelf, placing them on the table. "If you sign the divorce papers now and leave with your belongings, I won't demand alimony. I know getting any money from you would be futile anyway. So unfair. Divorce? How can you say that? Haven't I devoted myself to this house all these years? Have you done any proper housework in these last 10 years? Have you ever helped with the business? Does spending someone else's money on young men count as devotion to the house? It was the first time we saw Sarah's usually mild-mannered and reserved father-in-law this angry. Seeing this, Jessica, who had come down to the living room, was visibly trembling from the shock. Jessica, you're part of this too. You came back home because you couldn't make it in Manhattan, and now you can't find a job but still act all high and mighty. In the end, you stopped working entirely. Whose escapism did you inherit? It's time for you to leave this house. Next, we saw Jessica's shock and resistance. She believed she was an important member of the family, but the reality was different. Wait a minute, Dad. Mom might be a lost cause, but I'm your precious daughter, right? The family conflict deepened as Jessica asserted her place, revealing her betrayal towards her mother. Jessica, are you betraying Mom now? Nancy was astounded, feeling betrayed by her daughter at the last moment. However, as the two started to create a commotion, he sternly silenced them with a shout. If I just kick you out, it'll cause trouble for everyone, so I've asked an acquaintance to take you in. They'll be here soon to pick you up. Get your minimum belongings ready. Left with no choice but to obey, Nancy began packing her belongings with Jessica. After writing the divorce notice, then an acquaintance of the stepfather arrived to take Nancy and Jessica away. The person who came to pick them up was running a factory with dormitories, and it seemed they would be working there. John, Richard, and I talked to the employees about the company being absorbed and prepared for the busy days ahead for our future. Finally, I found out I was pregnant at that time. When I told the president of company A, he was delighted and promised to send someone to replace me, which was a huge relief. Currently, John and Richard are working even harder for the sake of our upcoming child.